Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Welcome back to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. And it's good that we did this like this, where we should have gone yesterday but went today because tomorrow is once again Thanksgiving. Hey, Mark.
How you doing today?
Good, good.
Good, good. All right. We were just backstage talking about how things have changed around our own little towns and how it's once you get out of the Lindsay or Escojedo compound, it's a completely different world than what we're used to.
Yeah, there's more people. Um, and there's more people doing commerce.
Mhm.
And there's lights like the red brake lights. It's like a light show across the city, and we're on the outskirts of Dade County, so we're on the western edge facing the Everglades, and yet this is like a metropolis,
Yeah.
right where we're at. The downtown area is the hub
Mhm.
in theory, but that's not true because everything is a hub. In essence, all townships have merged into one
Yeah.
long, contiguous, massive economic. It's vibrant. People are walking, crossing streets, but it's not like what you. The reason I wasn't impressed because I went to go pay a bill,
Mhm.
and I'm a homeboy, like I was mentioning to Mark in the thing. But I went to go pay a bill, and the lights. It was dusk, from dusk to darkness. In truth, um, and as I did my travel, the volume of activity, kind of like an ant colony.
Mhm.
People were to and fro, the stores, the lights, the neons, and it reminded me of a laid out. It reminded me of like the image or impressions you get of New York, Central Times Square, whatnot, and this and that.
Mhm.
There the buses, the this, the that, and then you go into the shops, and it. I guess when I was a kid growing up, there was that, but not like this. It has incremented in volume. So you could see cosmopolitanism perfectly well 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, not a problem. But the volume of it was
Yeah.
not anywhere near this. Where you walk
Mhm.
into a store and the activity is buzzing every aisle, people walking back and forth, the neon light, another store next to it, a lady making a decision, another one, and you're walking through. I mean, I know that that's like how society and cities work, but my point is the volume was impressive.
Yeah, and now you know why I got away from big cities. I like it out here. I mean, except for this time of year. We went grocery shopping yesterday, and the place was nuts. 2 days before Thanksgiving, oh my God, I forgot to get whipped cream. Oh my God, I forgot chocolate chips. We found almost everything we were looking for, but we had to hit one, two, three, four stores to get it
Yeah.
because some people didn't have it, some people were out of it. Oh no, we're not going to have that until Christmas or whatever. So, uh, but and this is a small town. I can only imagine something like what you're dealing with. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I'm used to it being metropolitan from north of the bay all the way down to south of the bay. And the only way you're in another city is when you see that you are now, entering whatever, Fremont,
Not
entering San
even
Jose,
not
whatever.
even San Francisco when I went, although I was there for a couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
and that was buzzing.
Mm-hmm.
Early 2000s. It was buzzing. There were people everywhere, but even
Yep.
that, to be
Mm-hmm.
fair, doesn't compare to what my little jaunt out today,
Yeah.
dude. It's just
Oh,
it's
I
just
know.
blanketing of people doing commerce, even at the late hours. Obviously, it's not like neither. It's not something that one should be shocked over. It, but it's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's
and it's
impressive.
only going to get the population is only going to get denser and denser and denser because you're in that situation where you're right up against the Everglades. They can't build out, so they can only build up to accommodate more people. And you see that all around you. So it's only going to get more worse.
But why is it worse? You're saying worse.
Well, I mean, it's going to get denser and denser and more people, and things are going to get louder,
Because
and there's going
worse,
to be
it
more
depends.
problems. There's going to be more traffic. There's going to be more competition for the groceries in the stores. I mean, they're going to have to open up more stores to accommodate all these people.
Hmm.
And that's going to take up more land. So, you're either going to drive further for the groceries you need, or somebody's going to tear down a store to build a bigger one.
Yeah,
You know, so.
they tore down a whole. Where I was at today
Hmm.
was a different part of town,
Yeah.
and the area I was walking, the stores I was in, with lighting and neon lights and people trafficking back and forth and purchasing and putting stuff like the actual structure that I was in,
Hmm.
not 20 years ago, were trailers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, on occasion, would be there to drop off a friend that might have lived in one of the trailers. So I'm standing in an area that used to be something else and something else and something else and something else.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And the idea that it was a trailer park
Hmm.
with a lot of people
Yeah.
and that I was walking inside a store did not come to me until right now, until I remembered that I was
Hmm.
walking on top of the remains
Hmm.
of what used to be home accommodations for many people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I was laughing at was Linda doesn't really like going downtown with me anymore because I'm like the typical old man wearing a hat, driving a pickup. Well, that used to be nothing but pear orchard out there. And oh, I remember that was a Datsun dealership over here. Yeah, I used to go to a store over, that kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, 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 old man, get off the road. I don't mind nostalgia, but do it from the side of the road. I'm trying to get somewhere. Uh,
The ever changing faces of cities and towns in America. I mean, because um, a lot of good has happened,
mhm,
in my opinion, from me studying history in the context that I have.
mhm.
And it's allowed me to investigate places that sparked my curiosity that I wouldn't have had the curiosity for if not steps if previous steps had not stumbled me into certain areas.
Yeah.
But in so doing, like sniffing around,
Mhm,
it has given me a broader context
mhm.
in which to view occurrences throughout history. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm an expert, but like
Yeah.
within the context of the things that I've studied,
Mhm.
I've been able to get all the Lego pieces and be able to construct a roadmap of certain things.
Yeah.
And and you can see it from afar better. So like our increment of people in the country
Mhm,
from its beginning to now
mhm.
obviously accompanies that you said, that more people, more accommodations, and so on and so forth. Um, and with it comes a lot of changes, like what you're saying, where you see, oh, that used to be an orchard field or whatnot. And even cities back in the day, in today's equivalence, you could have almost judged them as slightly more rural, although they weren't. I get it.
Right. Yeah.
More cozy as opposed to this expansive savagery that we have now. And it
Yeah.
all comes with its benefits and negatives and pros and cons, but it is an
Well,
incredible thing to see.
you used to have to drive to town. Now town has come to you. And it's the same thing around here. We used to have to drive to town to go grocery shopping or to go get a haircut or what have you.
Yeah.
Not anymore. I mean, I've got one, two, three grocery stores within 3 miles. When it used to be, we had to go about 7 or 8 to get to a grocery store. You know, so it's happening all over the place. And I don't know. I think it's kind of a self-defeating thing in that, like my little town here, little town, 80,000 people in the big city, about 10 miles away. Um, Everybody shopped in town. So, especially Saturday, Sunday, if you found a place to park, you parked and then you walked all over town and hit the various stores because it was downtown. It wasn't like there were huge parking lots. You parked out on the street. Then over the years, suddenly a mall opened up and people got away from going downtown. They went to the mall. And then suddenly other stores opened up out of town and people got away from going to the mall and they're going to these other stores. I mean, you've got a Walmart here, you've got a Home Depot here, you've got a Best Buy over there. They're all spread out just enough that you've got to go from parking lot to parking lot to parking lot, where we used to go into town and park and then walk around, do all of our shopping. Well, we no longer have to drive all the way into town because all that stuff is coming out towards us. So it's getting closer to us out here in the rural areas. Meanwhile, housing is also getting closer to us out here in the rural areas, and the whole place is building up.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so.
it's an impressive thing. Um, we're definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
We, in a sense, are keepers of the flame in terms of the past, like our
Yeah.
forefathers before us, respectively. I saw this video introducing the American public for the first time to the rotary phone,
Oh wow.
and they had this meeting where they sat down, in like, just a room and whatnot, and they explained the functions
Mm-hmm.
in a very meticulous way
Mm-hmm.
because people needed to learn.
Yeah. Because
Before that, they would pick up the thing and they'd say, and
and the operator would answer the other end. Yeah.
and they'd say number please,
Mm-hmm.
and that stopped happening.
Mm-hmm.
It happened. It started being uh, a bell, a tone,
Mm-hmm.
and that tone is what we existed on until the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
No, until past the 2000s.
Yeah.
Because prior to the tone, or actually, I don't know, phones.
Yeah. The dial tone. Yeah.
Yeah. So something that we were used to be new. It
You
used to
know.
be scary. It used to be uncomfortable. People were not happy with it. Some.
Yeah.
They were like, well, wait a second. Because the idea, if you put yourself in their shoes, they had a nice greeting at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of each call, and somebody did the work for them.
Mm-hmm.
All they had to do was say the number, which was a shorter number compared to today.
Mm-hmm.
Then they introduced this dial, and now people had to work for that. They're paying for the service, and you have to put your finger in the thing and rotate it.
Mm-hmm.
That's extra work. Well, no, don't
Well,
worry, folks. In the video, don't
mm-hmm.
worry, folks. In case we will still have operators in case you need assistance and so on. So they'll still be there, but you don't have to the tone replaces the operator.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you need it, put your finger in the O for operator. Bring it all the way around, let it go, and the operator will come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
But
and so it was interesting to see.
you brought up something interesting because now with our cell phones, I don't know if you have a landline. I don't know if you have a landline or not, but if you don't have a landline, when was the last time you heard a dial tone? Dial tone.
I haven't heard one in a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So I would imagine there are adults walking around right now that have never heard a dial tone
A lot of things they haven't heard or known or seen.
or a busy signal.
Within you, Mark,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is relative, but within you,
Mm-hmm.
as you walk around town
Hmm.
is contained an incredible amount, whether you know it or not. I mean, you probably know it to some degree, but I'm posing the concept.
Hmm.
As you walk around town, within Mark Lindsay's brain
Hmm.
is contained a library of knowledge,
Of archaic information. Yeah.
of archaic information that people today could not even, nor would even know where to start.
Yeah.
And when you come across someone that's missing said
Hmm.
information
Yeah.
and you introduce them to such, that is the moment in which age
Hmm.
is quantified.
Yep. Well, there's all kinds of stuff like that. Like just little things. When was the last time you asked somebody for the time? Excuse me, sir, you know what time it is?
No.
Something like that. I mean, we've all got a clock. We've all got everything right here. Which actually it's kind of a shame too, because that was a good opening line to just start talking to a girl. Excuse me, do you happen to, I see you got to watch the, what's the time, please?
Yeah, but that,
That could get you that at least got communication and got eye contact.
let me ask you another question. I'm sorry for,
Okay.
but another question.
No, you're all right.
Well, this is a slightly, but I'll say maybe it's just me,
Hmm.
and you're gonna have to forgive me, not you personally, but I'm talking about broadly speaking.
Hmm.
I have another thing that has happened
Okay.
that I've noticed when I interact in the world.
Hmm.
Have you not noticed, or have you noticed? I realize when I interact with people, I have I observe more deer in the headlights looks than ever before in my freaking life. On all levels of freaking society, everybody seems to have when I come across them, and I say everybody, that's exaggerated, but a fair
Yeah, I
amount.
get I get what you mean though. Yeah.
There's this confused,
Hmm.
not quite getting the world around them look in people's faces,
Hmm.
even at the beginning of a quick explanation or ask a question.
Hmm.
Deer in the headlight.
It's just like, oh my God, they talk to me. You know,
No,
um,
even whatever the hell you're saying, who knows what the hell's going on?
I have seen that in younger people, but the older they get, I guess the more used to social interaction when you're downtown with perfect strangers is more the norm. Because I'm a gregarious guy. I mean, I'll strike up a conversation with the person next to me in the checkout line. I don't care. We're only going to be there for a couple of minutes. I'll find some stupid headline on a tabloid magazine to talk about, or whatever. It beats standing around looking sullen. It just, dang man, they're taking their time, ain't they? Yeah.
I'm
Or
more leaning
whatever.
towards.
You know.
I'm more leaning towards. Although that I get
Hmm.
that because there is that aspect of technology,
Hmm.
but I'm leaning towards something to the effect of, do you know that saying? I'm gonna get wrong. I'll get it wrong, but that saying that says "master of none, but student of all," or something to that effect.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of people that use it in the context of you fiddle about with too many things and you never dominate one particular thing. And that's not good because you want to be competent highly in one thing. I disagree.
I I
But,
like to say, instead of that, I like to say I know a lot about a little and a little about a lot.
but the reason I'm saying this,
Hmm.
The value that people emphasize
Mm-hmm.
is being a master of something,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to dipping your toes in many things, but being a master of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And well, that's where the judgment call is within that saying.
Yeah.
When people say that, they say, well, I can do a little bit of everything, but I don't dominate any one thing. Well, some of the people argue that you want to dominate one thing, like being very acutely good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyways, the reason I'm saying this, I disagree in a way. It's better to be a jack of all trades when it comes to much of the mundane things in life and some of the a little bit more advanced things, because you need to know how to interact with people.
Sure.
You need to know how to tie your freaking shoes. You need to know what an interaction is and what it is not.
Yeah.
You need to be able to strike up a conversation, like you're saying, or be able to respond to somebody when they say,
Yeah.
a simple factoid
Mm-hmm.
that anyone should, in theory, know and whatnot. Beagle, stop that crap right now. He's bumping and jiving and pushing, and anyways. So that's my point. That when you're out and about,
Mm-hmm.
any normal thing you say or casual thing you say, I get the deer in the headlight look more often than I would think normal.
I, I get it sometimes, and it's mainly younger people and predominantly women. Younger guys, if you throw a joke in there or something, they're more than willing to join in. Usually, not everybody, but usually the guy will kind of he'll smile and he'll nod or something like that. Linda's sitting there talking about, I don't like French dressing. Let's get Catalina. You turn around, you look at the guy, so you see what I'm dealing with over here? He'll just kind of smile, nod his head, and keep going and, chuckle as he's walking or something like that. And the same with her. She'll be like, do you believe he said that to me? And the woman, I'm just with a smile on her face, knowing that we're BSing with one another. But it depends on it depends on the age group. I find that older people are more willing to just jump right in there and banter back and forth with you because that's how we were raised. We grew up doing that. You know, I grew up hearing people talking about, well, the pears are getting close to ripening. It's almost time to go pick this season and stuff like that. Just two guys standing next to each other in the checkout line. That was commonplace. It was common to see people at one booth, a guy turn around and start talking to somebody in the booth behind him at a restaurant. That was common. It didn't happen every time, but nobody got freaked out if it did.
It used to be normal here too. People would that were strangers would
Mm-hmm.
interact with each other,
Mm-hmm.
but there was less people, and now people are trying to get in and out and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, that's something that's also I'm going to go out on a limb and say a cultural norm type of a thing. Because, like, when we first got over to Germany, as part of the military, you had to go through what they called German Head Start. And that's where you learn some of the basic laws, some of the basic customs, and some of the basic, a little bit, a fragmentary bit of the language. So you didn't look like a total buffoon when you went downtown the first time. And it would be common if you're sitting at a table in a restaurant and there's two empty seats at your table, it would be common for somebody to walk up and ask, is this seat free? And then they sit down at the same table you're at, and they're their group and you're your group. So that was common. It would be common for somebody to come up and sit next to you on the bus, even though
Hmm.
their seat's open.
Yeah.
They're so packed in and so densely populated that there just isn't space to keep a distance.
Yeah.
They considered right there them That's personal. It was nothing for them to stand there and just look at you in the bus stop, look at you up one side and down the other. Check out your hair, how you got your hair combed, check out your t-shirt and everything, and then look down. Oh, neat jeans. He's got them rolled up down into a cuff. That's kind of pretty cool. That was not considered rude or uh, anything at all. If you speak to them or lay a hand on them, that's rude. Now you've crossed the line.
If you put your hands in their hair and go chicka 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 chicka
Yeah,
chicka
that's a little bit of a that's crossing the line.
on
But
that,
it's simply because there's so many people in such a small area, they have to be that way.
yeah, there's rules you have to follow because
Hmm.
of sheer volume and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, on that sitting thing,
Hmm.
the other day I went to the barber,
Hmm.
and by the way, I didn't. This is combed after frickin'. This is how I went out. I should have combed it properly. I left the mountain here, but it's 10 times better than what it was before because I had my hair was, you know, um,
Hmm.
flaring out and whatnot.
Yeah.
I went to the Cuban barber,
Hmm.
and a Cuban barber shop is the equivalent of what you see in the movies as far as an Italian barber shop.
Okay.
There's not much difference other than the political variations. But there is some sort of trend now thinking on it all of a Southern European derived
Hmm.
cultural thing where people are back and forth gabbing, but in a certain way. And it doesn't have to be Italian,
Hmm.
but let's say
Yeah.
I walked in and there was a seat and I
Hmm.
took it.
Hmm.
When you walk in, it's a small room, barber
Hmm.
shop.
Yeah.
The typical thing is you say good day
Hmm.
when you walk into that environment.
Hmm.
And so I did so and I
Hmm.
sat down. There was a row of seating with two or three older gentlemen sitting in a row, and then a couple of seats
Hmm.
after that were empty. When I walked in,
Hmm.
as opposed to sitting in the next seat next to the guy,
Right.
I customarily move one seat over, leaving a blank seat on either side of me.
Hmm.
So I had one on my left empty, and one on my right empty, and me in the middle, and then the other guy a little bit further. Because I don't want to do that, sit next to another guy like
Yeah.
right next, unless I actually have to.
Right.
And I think that that's an unspoken rule somehow.
Yeah.
Because that's a little too close for comfort, and there's some,
Well, you were giving somebody space, man.
hmm and plus, and then another guy came in,
Hmm.
but due to the fact that there was an empty seat in between me and the other guy,
Hmm.
so he would have to sit cuddled in between two guys. The psychology of that, and then one empty on the other side, but on the end, he sat on the empty barber's chair
Uh,
as an overspill, as opposed to choosing to be what was it? What was that? Who's the remember that game? Who's the something something in the middle?
yeah.
I
Yeah.
forget the detail. So he avoided the middle one.
Hmm.
That would mean he would be crunched in between two guys, and who the
Yeah.
hell wants that?
Yeah.
Um, or on the edge, and I found that
Uh,
funny as hell.
that's universal, man. That is all over the place here in America. I've seen that. I've seen that here. I've seen it in California. I've seen it in Nevada. I've seen it in Alabama. I've seen it in Hawaii. I've seen it in California. I mean, you name it. I've seen that everywhere I've ever been in America. I can't really say about over in Europe because I went to military barbershops where it was the same. But it's that unspoken rule. There would be a guy sitting on one end of a little 3-seat sofa and another guy sitting on the other end of a 3-seat sofa. The other chairs are full. There's an empty seat in the middle of that sofa, and a guy will walk in and just lean on the wall and not move towards that sofa until one of those opens up.
We're always poised
Yeah.
on the precipice of war and peace.
But
It's great.
but then again, I think the barber shop is the perfect example of how a line for something should work. Because when you walk into a barbershop, you say hello, what have you, you see everybody there. You don't know who's next. You only know that you're last. But you also noticed the next person that comes in behind you. They don't know who's next. They know they're last. You just now know you're before that guy. But then the barber will say, okay, who is next? And the guy who's next knows he's next. And the people who aren't next know they're not next.
Yeah.
And nobody violates that. It's unspoken. You don't know who's next. But the guy will get up, he'll go sit in the chair. And the person after him won't say a word. But when you see the last person who was there before you walked in, they get up and go to the chair. You magically know you're next.
That's right.
You wouldn't think of that in the grocery store. You wouldn't think of that in the bank, waiting in line for the teller. You would not even think about walking into a bank, sitting down in a chair, and when that guy left the teller, get up and walk over. Oh, hell no. The minute you step out of line, that's it. You've lost your place.
So when it was my turn, um, you know how they gab between each other and whatnot, and they're Cuban. The other barber was talking amongst everyone and said, today I was sworn in, and today I am an American citizen, he said.
Cool.
And they were talking about attire and this and that. And actually, I asked,
Mm-hmm.
I said, congratulations
Mm-hmm.
in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
The guy doesn't speak English.
Okay.
And I asked, well, where did you do the swearing?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, in Kendall.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, great. Well, how many people were there? He says, about 30. As well. And then they talked about how they dressed and whatnot, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I proceeded to explain, because all those people in there,
Mm-hmm.
like I mentioned to you before, so I've been around so long,
Mm-hmm.
even though maybe I'm not the oldest person, I'm, in a
Mm-hmm.
middle era sort of timeline. But Miami has such a turnover.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably one out of two in that room,
Mm-hmm.
or three, that can remember the 80s, the 70s. I was a little kid, but derived from over half a century of immigration here.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else was spanking new.
Yeah.
With that comes a lot of missing details,
Yeah.
um, along the timeline of the area, which we talked about earlier.
Sure.
Outside of Miami, Dade County,
Mm-hmm.
no one 100%, unless they lived here, has a context sufficient to really see the intricacies of what's the history here is. It's kind of like when you say, oh, when you visit a place, that's
Mm-hmm.
different than just studying it or whatnot. Because you're entrenched in the thing in an actual physical
Mm-hmm.
place. So I know this about this room in this barber shop
Mm-hmm.
and about the people talking. And I know that I have a little bit of background, and they may have it too, residually or as a side effect of them studying,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't. So I this specific thing, I said, oh, when my grandmother swore in at the end of her life, latter years of her life, because my
Mm-hmm.
father decided might as well, although he never became a United States citizen ever
Mm-hmm.
on purpose. In
Yeah.
fact, one time my father said, son, we were walking to purchase something somewhere. He says, son, I just received a letter that I have to renew my residency, but it's late. So right now I'm walking around illegal. Did you know that, son?
Wow.
He said, I'll do that in a few days. Um, well, my dad was a Vietnam. He was a Cuban Missile Crisis era
Yeah.
veteran of
Yeah.
the United States Army, and they were all allotted, and many did. But my father, on principle, said that he would live and
Mhm.
die a Cuban.
Mhm.
That wasn't um, that was something he just by
Yeah.
on principle. So principle was very important to us.
Yeah.
The idea, the notion of principle.
Mhm.
Um, it makes no. I don't think that he had that principle,
Mhm.
but I don't think that a person that does, you don't have to give one away to have the other, and this, you can have but the idea of serving
Well,
of there's something there, but I don't want to go into it because I wanted to finish. Go ahead. You had something to say. 'Cause-
I was just going to say that your father came here firmly believing that one day he would be able to go back, or at least hoping that one day he would be able to go back. So you've explained that to me a couple of times, so I can completely understand his stance on that.
yeah, there
Because
was
if he
no.
gave up his Cuban citizenship, he may not be able to go back.
No, it wasn't that because they could still do that. Like Cubans, like most. I don't. Yeah, most Cubans are just basically
Hmm.
American citizens at this
Hmm.
point, and they could still go back because it's not. You don't give up one and to save the. You can't have America only recognizes the United States citizenship.
Right.
However, like for instance, myself, I could become due to my grandfather.
Hmm.
It's got to be through my grandfather because although my grand on all sides, th- my grandparents on all sides going back, except my grandmother that has Italian and whatnot,
Hmm.
have Spanish parents or
Right.
grandparents.
Right.
So what ends up from Spain.
Hmm.
So they could have gone and taken and become Spanish citizens and just gone to Spain.
Hmm.
Um, I can only do it through although I can trace it back on all lines,
Hmm.
except for the Italian one and whatnot. Um, uh, I could get a Spanish citizenship
Hmm.
by law of blood. They
Hmm.
call it something. I'm paraphrasing, so that my blood would be recognized as basically just Spanish. That where they could put me into their fold with no problem. But it's through my grandfather.
Right.
Why? Because it's the distance
Ah,
away. So it's through him.
yeah.
If I did that, if I did that, Spain only recognizes their citizenship,
Right.
and the United States only recognizes its citizenship.
Right.
So you could have both, but when
Right.
entering each country, you would have
You,
to produce or give up one for the other.
yeah.
So you could keep both, but they only are respected in each country's thing.
Hmm. Right. 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 So, but what I'm getting at is with the hostility between the US and Cuba at the time, if he were to get US citizenship, it wouldn't be recognized in Cuba, right?
Oh no, but well, if
So that would be his reasoning behind not getting US citizenship.
no,
No? Okay.
the Cuban government
Hmm.
does not recognize a Cuban-born person, even if they're exiled,
Hmm.
as American. The children are different. Like
Yeah. Right.
let's say if I were to travel to Cuba,
Hmm.
I'm not a Cuban. That's the context in which I've run into problems with our American friends that it won't go into beyond a certain limit. There's no possible reasoning. You are born in the country. You are of the country you are born.
Right.
Um, ancestry be damned.
Hmm.
An American, regardless,
Hmm.
the colloquial sayings of Cuban American or Italian American,
Yeah.
those things are colloquial things, but legally
You're just an American. Yeah.
you're an American. I mean, there's no law that would not if you're born of the
Sure.
anyways. So Cuba doesn't do that though. They only recognize people that were born in Cuba,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what the hell as unless there's a complication there. But the point is this: yes, he did it on principle. There's more to it than what I just said.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of spattering on
Walk
about it.
down.
But
Yeah.
but the point is that he did it on principle, and
Mm-hmm.
he said that to me, and and but I already knew his scenario, and that he was totally down. So what he valued was this concept of freedom,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that was passed on. And
Mm-hmm.
Cubans in general, because if you're taken on a ride where your rights are deprived of you, you have an increased probability of appreciating the simple freedoms
Mm-hmm.
that are important that we all have, you know.
Yeah.
So there's an appreciation there. So Cubans sort of lean in that direction, but it's due, well, anyways, I'm getting away from the thing. Anyway, so I told them, well, my grandmother at the barber shop did the thing, the citizenship at the Miami Beach Convention Center.
Mm-hmm.
I told the people there, and they started listening.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, and it was an ocean of people, and it
Yeah.
was the
Mm-hmm.
convention center was awash
Mm-hmm.
with new potential citizens. And then I further explained, and this would shock Americans across the country, I would assume. The citizenship ritual
Mm-hmm.
was, guess what language it was done in?
English, wasn't it? Probably Spanish.
All of it was Spanish, and it
Oh,
was
wow.
and it was done at the same time
Mm-hmm.
to the ocean of people, and the Pledge of Allegiance was done, and I was amongst the crowd, next to my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
She got her diploma and this and that. It was, and they did it by rows, and
Mm-hmm.
they had it all set up, like it was all organized.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: the reality in Miami would shock Americans across the country because of this basic English, Anglo-Saxon derived and Spanish world derived variation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and by the way, I grew up in a mix of it. It's so weird to be
Mm-hmm.
able to sort of like untangle it. But here's the thing: I believe I did. Well, yeah. Anytime the Pledge of Allegiance is done, I participate. I always have, even though I wasn't part of the thing. But so we all participated, and nobody knew what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: nobody knew what the hell. So what I'm getting at is this. I'll wrap it up with this. There's more to it, but it was an ocean of brand new Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Understand what this is:
Mm-hmm.
an ocean of brand new Americans. And me at the age I was at the time, whatever it was, 20 something, whatever the hell. The knowledge that I had at that time of America
Mm-hmm.
was sufficient that I could hold even at that age, an extended conversation about American things, historical things. Maybe not as good as I could now,
Mm-hmm.
but sufficient where I have the basic frickin' structure of things, how things rolled out across
Yeah.
time. I had some sense of it with actual names and occurrences and whatnot.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I'm not but whatever. Um, I don't know that they would have, but it's freaking crazy. Um, and I can see it. I could take my feet out of my shoes and vantage point stuff from different aspects
Mm-hmm.
without not without entangling myself, but you get the point. I could see the different angles in a room if I wanted to, so that I can see or imagine other perspectives before jumping off a cliff. I could
Mm-hmm.
sort of say, okay, so the underlying connection between this country of ours
Mm-hmm.
with its values and its basic tenets.
Hmm.
the freedoms that an American had, like just the basic concept that weaves
Hmm.
America together for these kids, or kids, they were all old people, for these new citizens,
Hmm.
the common thread was the concept baseline of freedom.
Hmm.
The details be damned.
Yeah.
So whether George Washington, whether Lincoln, whether the great battle at Gettysburg, whether the capital of frickin' Minnesota, whether
It was just you're free.
the basic prize
Hmm.
is freedom.
Hmm.
And I think, well, I think a lot of things, but I'll just leave it at that. What do
Well,
you think?
yeah, but you're talking about a group of people that had it taken away from them.
Yeah,
Some of them may never have had it at all. So yeah,
yeah,
you could see what that was all about. You could
yeah,
see how that was the driving force behind it, and the details. We'll get to that later on. Maybe we won't.
yeah.
But was that important at that time? No, it
Well,
wasn't.
in order to be, so the notion, so look, it's going to be complicated, but I'll toss it out there. If I were to relocate my butt
Hmm.
to Germany
Hmm.
and began the process of Germanizing myself
Hmm.
in a legal way,
Hmm.
where I no longer, where I became, German
Wait.
citizen or whatever the case.
Hmm.
My expectation personally, from my vantage point, is that I would learn. This is independently of what I said prior, because there's
Hmm.
complications. But me myself, from my vantage point, it could be France, Germany, whatever the hell. My expectation is that my joining that
Hmm.
would be to learn the basics sufficient for me to conduct myself or interact
Hmm.
within the society that I'm joining.
Yeah.
So that would entail learning German.
Hmm.
It would entail a bunch of things. It would be, in my mind, a baseline requisite out of reason. It
Yeah.
just goes to, because if I go to China,
Yeah, you're gonna have to learn the language. You're gonna have to learn the customs. You're gonna have to learn all that other stuff. And it's the same with Germany. Germany's a good example. You would have to take a literacy test. You would have to. There are several hoops you would have to jump through, but they have laws that are different from ours. For instance, they have an official language. We don't. So the fact that the ceremony was performed in Spanish, it, fine. But if you go to Germany, it would be performed in German, and that's all. If you were to go to France, it would be performed in French, and that's all.
the situation in Miami is so unique
Hmm.
in that respect. And by the way, it's it's very unique. It's unique. I recognize it. I've mentioned it to you many a times before in our conversations, and I can't stop from being surprised, even while being part of this in a very literal sense. I'm just always freaking, that deer in the headlight. Look, it's not a deer in the headlight, but it's like a jaw dropped
Hmm.
open. Look, because there are concepts. So I don't know what it would be to be who I am, who I am, and I know the things that I know about the country that I was
Hmm.
born in,
Yeah.
because I was taught in its
Hmm.
ways. But this does not have to be so. It does not have to be. What I'm getting at is that you could perfectly have someone parallel to you in
Hmm.
Miami-Dade County that has no freaking idea about anything to do with George Washington, Not that I'm a George Washington frickin' expert,
Right.
but
Well,
you
it
get the
depends on
point.
where your interest lies. Yeah, it depends on where your interest lie. We all went to the same classes in the same schools and what have you. Some people just aren't interested in that.
Yeah, but this uninterested thing, I get it. But there are okay. So I guess so in parallel to any other place in the country, and I guess there would be differences from
Mhm.
places to places. But Miami
Sure,
has
it's
this.
a lot of regional things. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of regional things, but this Miami scenario
Mhm.
is a very unique. So look, I guess I'll wrap up this whole thing because it's kind of scattered, but there's a point mixed in there or a few points. Um, in my mind, there's nothing more American. Listen to this, and it's not 100% true, but my point is, there's nothing more American than a person walking around Miami that doesn't speak a lick of English, other than yes, thanks, a number one at McDonald's, but has the concept of freedom.
Yeah.
It's not a throwaway line. It's the acknowledgement
Hmm.
that we are individuals and that requires us to respect other people's autonomy
Hmm.
and a a pulling of the reins of our desires beyond the line that's drawn in the sand when it comes to my rights ending when another one's, you know, rights begin.
Begins. Yeah. Yeah.
So that basic tenet is spills over the United States
Hmm.
into the oceans along its borders because it's the human desire, and that's why it's such a successful concept. Um, it's just that the United States has accentuated it in such a unique and
Well,
defined way.
that's because I think it's kind of, I won't say driven into us, but well, it was anyway when I was growing up. That concept was driven into you. You were educated in that fact. You were taught freedom, independence, liberty. You were taught self sufficiency. You were taught how to handle things on your own. You were taught to be self reliant, that maybe you didn't know everything. I mean, if your car broke down on the highway, yeah, you got to call a wrecker and have it towed to the garage and get it fixed if you don't know how to fix it yourself. But you weren't helpless. You weren't hopeless. You didn't know, you weren't thrown to the wolves. You could somehow function in society. You knew how to get a job. You knew who to talk to get an apartment. You, I mean, we couldn't wait to get our driver's license because that was more independence and freedom. We could be more self-reliant. I didn't have to have somebody drive me down to the store. I could get in the car and go get it myself. Doing it yourself, being able to do it yourself was something that was prized and valued. We couldn't wait to get out of our parents' houses and be out on our own, and that, I don't think that's taught anymore. And I think that's part of our problem as a country, but I won't even get into that. It
You don't
was
want to
it
go there.
it was a source of pride.
Yeah.
Being able to do it yourself was a source of pride.
If
And
the
no,
tools,
not everything was perfect the first two or three times you did it, but you're talking about jack of all trades, master of none. That's kind of where that came from, because it wasn't that long ago in our history. If you couldn't afford to fix a window that wouldn't close all the way, if you couldn't afford to have somebody come fix it for you, you did it yourself, or you were just cold and wet a lot, you know. If you were working your way across the plains of the country heading west to seek your fame and fortune, and your wagon broke down and you were too dumb or too lazy to fix it, you just stayed there. That was it. So
Yeah,
being able to fix something on
you
your
like that
own,
saying,
yeah,
the
I
wagon
do,
one.
because it's the truth. It is the well, you don't think people headed out for Tulsa, Oklahoma on purpose, do you? You know, it's just think of it this way. Everywhere you see a nice spread in this country, you see a nice ranch looking house on a nice piece of property. What do they got? They got two broken wagon wheels out front by the mailbox. You know, it's just the truth. That's the way it is out here. So, but what I'm getting at is that that self-reliance, that ability to change your own tire, that ability to put a fence board back up if the wind blows it over. You don't have to worry about calling a handyman to come fix it for you. You know, it's just a matter of self-reliance, self-sufficiency, and being able to accomplish it on your own. You know, uh, I don't remember anybody from my generation or any of my schoolmates talking about having low self-esteem, because there's no bigger boost to your self-esteem than being able to do something you set out to do. Just that sense of accomplishment on its own. You know, I don't know.
The Going back to the language thing for half a second. Also the other day,
Mhm.
on a separate day, I had left to go do some chores and whatnot. Driving back home, there's construction around here and whatnot, so
Sure.
you have trucks coming in and just a bunch of stuff. And we're also blocked off by a canal that makes us like an island on one edge.
Hmm.
So a lot of outside traffic doesn't come in and leaving a road to come around for construction and whatnot. So I left and came back. When I was coming back, there was this huge Sherman Williams truck
Hmm.
stopped in front of my house,
Hmm.
blocking my parking.
Hmm.
Keeping in mind this is Miami and you know how this the things that I've said.
Hmm.
I stopped my car and the truck was higher. I
Hmm.
stopped my car next to the window, driver's side,
Hmm.
and I just stopped there, and I could see through the tinted window, a guy there,
Hmm.
and I can't lower my window, so I
Hmm.
opened the door
Hmm.
and I just looked up straight into the window, driver's
Hmm.
side, waiting for him to, and so he lowered the window and he looked at me, and I said in Spanish, "¿Tú crees que tú puedes?" And he said, "I don't speak Spanish."
Hmm.
And he didn't say it neither here nor there, uh, with a tone or whatnot. It was just a matter of fact saying it.
Hmm.
And then I said, when you have a chance, could you either move back slightly or forward so I can get in?
Hmm.
And he was looking at me. He stopped for a second. That second, my mind, I can, neither here nor there, but I'll just say, in a few seconds, I can lay out in my brain, in some cases,
Hmm.
X amount of variations or possibilities
Hmm.
about an interaction.
Hmm.
Imagine forking. Imagine drawing in the sand 6 lines,
Hmm.
and each line has a different variation on the. And I'm sure that everybody does this, or many people do this, as opposed to waiting for the one line and having the assumption that one line is true. I take a stick and fork out a handful of lines drawn on the sand, and they all have different possibilities, and I hold them in a state of wait, and I do this like that, and I'm sure everybody does this, or a lot of people do. I can't see why they wouldn't. It's part of us thinking and interacting. And I could see in his face as I drew those lines like that, and then he said, "Oh," and he says, "Okay, sure," and he moved. But he wasn't too appreciative.
Mm.
Okay, that when he lowered the window and I looked upon him,
Mm.
that my decision was to speak Spanish to him because the assumption is that, you know, oh, he's Spanish when he's clearly not Spanish. After he told me, and the fact that I wouldn't have made that decision,
Well,
him realizing no, him realizing that I spoke both English and Spanish, and my
mhm.
decision was to address him in Spanish after looking at him, and the variation is an example of the deep waters in which we swim here in Dade County. In that, yes,
Well, most people speak Spanish there, don't they?
well, yeah, but here's the thing. Yeah, exactly. So yes, exactly. So the point is that in this lagoon where people paddle boat
Mhm.
that come from endless different variations of people,
Mhm.
the predominant language is Spanish.
Mhm.
I've already experienced sufficient
Mhm.
that I cannot look upon a person. You have to understand
Mhm.
and know whether they are of Spanish background or other.
Yeah.
You have to understand
Well,
that this,
but you're local to the area. You're used to that.
but this is the world
Mhm.
in which I exist, where you can look upon a
Sure.
person, let's say someone like yourself, where they have light eyes, the
Mhm.
blonde hair, stuff.
Yeah.
That does not,
You would not assume that I spoke Spanish though, would you?
in the context of you, no,
Mhm.
yeah, yes, I wouldn't know.
Mhm.
You have to understand, like in the context of you and I here,
Mhm.
we know each other, and I already know the variations. But in the context of a Mark Lindsay or
Anybody.
a blonde
Mhm.
person,
Yeah, that's what I meant.
you would not want to assume what the heck they speak.
Right.
But since the going rate is Spanish,
Mhm. All right. Don't see the problem. I
there's
think
a
you.
there's a tendency
Mhm.
for one to opt, which is what I did because I assumed. I mean, this guy wasn't a blonde hair guy because the more blonde, you know how we've always talked where um there's more blonde the further north in the
Mhm.
European spectrum you go, and that um this guy wasn't a blonde necessarily, so he could fit anywhere in the spectrum.
Right.
But I'm sure that he himself,
Well,
by
he.
looking at him, was not appreciative that I chose
Well,
Spanish over English for him.
I don't know about that because it's perfectly reasonable given where you live. I mean, I had people coming up to me all the time. Linda and I both. I
No,
can't tell
you
you.
don't know about that, but I'm saying in a moment's
Okay,
flash in the interaction.
but we've kind of lived in that world because Linda and I both. I can't tell you how many times when we lived over in Germany, people would come up to us asking directions, and we're like, I don't know, And then when I would try to speak German, they would. I had obviously I have an accent because I'm not a native German speaker, but I had more people ask me if I was from Poland than anywhere else. I don't know what a Polish accent trying to speak German sounds like. But evidently there was something I was doing that wasn't quite right because they asked me if I was from Poland more than any other country. A few people asked me if I was from England. One or two asked me if I was from America. But Linda and I had people come up to us all the time asking us for directions in German. I don't know if we looked a certain way or acted a certain way, but it was perfectly reasonable given where we were.
Yeah, in the context of where you are
Mm-hmm.
and the different variations, appearance, your the way you speak,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you have a fanny pack or not, though, that's a giveaway. But these vary because tourists usually. But the variables involved in all this stuff, like you're saying, will determine in which direction an assumption is going to lean.
Right.
I'm just saying that, well, number one, I don't know the inside the guy's mind,
Right.
but judging, I know what my criteria is in observation,
Yeah.
and
Well, I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody. I just think that your assumption is perfectly reasonable because, I mean,
yeah.
you live it every day. You
Well,
know.
no, the interaction, but the greater point of it was
Hmm.
not sussing out what the guy's mind. The broader concept is the idea that that I spoke of at the beginning is that this is such a different
Yeah.
combination of things, and
Hmm.
it's not an unimportant town
Yeah.
in the scheme of the United States.
Right.
This is a behemoth,
Hmm.
um,
And only getting bigger.
and only getting bigger. So I find it a striking, just the whole thing. But notwithstanding, you will find all other languages as well. And although you and I have spoken about this in the past, where I suggested to you, and some folks might remember that we've spoken, and I don't think you disagreed, that the United States, so it's a good idea, generally speaking, I assume, that people speak within the borders of a country a language that, or it could be 10. Let's say all people in the United States speak 10 languages interchangeably. Great. But my suggestion to you way back when was that a language that people can communicate in across the board is beneficial in that, well, hell, people can actually, it's
So
how,
everybody's on the same page. Yeah.
right, roughly in the, so I, and then you had mentioned as an addition, which was, I'm glad you did because it also made me sit and pause. But you said, well, English is not an official. It's not the official. There's no official language to the
Yeah.
United
We
States,
don't have an official language.
and so that's a valid thing. Well, it's not a valid thing. It's a truism because that's
Hmm.
true, which makes it valid. But the point is, it doesn't negate the idea that a common.
Oh
So,
yeah.
for instance, you and I could not have any of the conversations we've had if I couldn't speak English or
Yeah.
you couldn't
True.
speak English. We wouldn't. This would not exist. Or
Yeah.
it would be, I like apple caramel. You, I like
Mm.
caramel apple. Caramel apple, apple caramel. So we wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
break it down into deeper things. And that's not being disparaging of the variations and
No,
whatnot. But language is a congealer, if that can
I
be said,
agree. I
of
agree.
culture.
But the thing is, while I agree with you on certain levels, I don't see an issue on other levels. And what I mean by that is that used to be more important a few years ago than it is now. Um, because, well, let's just take Spanish, for instance. Spanish has become even, its usage is broadened out quite a bit. And where it used to be something notable, if you heard people speaking Spanish, it would get your attention. Not anymore. And it is spread into various industries. I mean, there are Spanish television networks where 30 years ago there wasn't. There are lawyers and doctors who are Spanish speaking or bilingual, whereas 30, 40 years ago they weren't. You were kind of at, if you didn't speak the language, you were kind of at the mercy of people you hoped you could trust, given those circumstances, given the circumstance, whatever it was. If you go to San Francisco, there are even Japanese and Cantonese um, TV and radio stations. There are radio stations in Hmong for folks from the Philippines. There are so it's kind of a regional thing as well. Over in Hawaii, there were TV stations that were Japanese, and I think there was one that was Korean. It just depends on your population and where the majority of that population is, and where they see an open market that isn't being serviced. You know, there was no Univision, there was no anything like that. Now there is. So it's easier to come here speaking another language and not have to learn English. I agree that it's a benefit, but it's not the guarantee that you're going to stay in the lower economic class that it used to be.
Yeah, there's a town here. I've mentioned it to you before. It's Hialeah,
Uh-huh.
and Hialeah is a Indian name,
Hmm.
so it's native.
Hmm.
But that's not the image I get when I think of the word Hialeah. See, this is a so Hialeah. When I think of Hialeah, I have a friend of my family, and she was brought up in Hialeah. And anytime we talk about Hialeah, it's, Hialeah, because it's overwhelmingly. So you can live your whole life in Hialeah
Hmm.
and not speak a lick up and down the societal ladder, and
Hmm.
not speak a lick of, and it's a huge city. It's bigger than probably many cities in the United States. You could spend your life not speaking English in high. In fact, there's interviews out there and where they
Hmm.
ask, what percent, and it's in Spanish, the interview, what percent of the time do you use English? And you see people while they're shopping, and it's like there's no.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. The notion. Here's a little caveat, or not caveat, but a little sort of um to expand on it. It is true, and when you threw that at me, and it had been told to me, but I never paid attention to it. To be fair,
Hmm.
but you bringing it up that English is not there's no official language, but we
Hmm.
do have government paper. There is a history. It was written in English. The part
Yeah.
that formed the country. I mean, so in order to have access, well, you don't. Let me just say.
Hmm.
I guess I'm trying to tie things together. So and there's that problem that you said where, well, I don't, if people don't care, they're not interested, but I want to put that to the side because I find that as a dead end in terms of, it's true, some people will just not care, but it's still a dead end because no more knowledge can be found. Not that knowledge is I guess beneficial to some people, but let's put that to the side. You you need to have access, or you don't need to. I- in fact, I should just shut up and say nothing because that would be the right answer. But I'm going to go forward anyhow. In order to acquire knowledge, you need to have access
Hmm.
to the information that lays out concepts,
Hmm.
historical and whatnot, as to the formation and values that
Hmm.
stumbled into each other to form situations, to know the history and background, to get a sense of those things, and be able to process them and have an
Right.
idea and be able to um um so if you go up to St. Paul, you may have a your country of origins background and culture, but now that you've become American, you do have a understanding of the lay of the land. And you go to St. Paul, you could be sitting in a bar and say, "Oh well, because not that that would happen in
Yeah,
1855,
but
X, Y, and Z." Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
the thing is, they have access because just about everything that you have said is out there in various languages.
Right, I was going to
If
get to
you
that.
if you like, for instance, if you want to go to school in And Linda corrected me, and she's absolutely right. I got them confused. I said Hmong because of Philippines. Hmong is Cambodia and Vietnam. Tagalog is the one that I was trying to think of for the Philippines. But yes, you can. There are Tagalog newspapers. There are Tagalog radio stations. For all I know, there may be Hmong, but because there is a large Vietnamese, Cambodian, and even Laos community there. But my point is that just like University of California, Berkeley, or San Francisco, they have their curricula in these other languages, and you can go to class and take the classes in those languages or do it online at home. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
access is there. It's up
yeah,
to the potential student to take those classes, you know.
yeah. Well, okay, so yeah, so there's availability. So you could go to a library
Hmm.
and all the books. Like my father had books in my father. I don't want to go as far as to say. So he was bilingual, but
Hmm.
I don't want to go as far as to say as dominant in English by any stretch of the imagination. It was
Hmm.
sufficient to do the
Right.
the necessary things. But if a conversation about politics or intricacies about geopolitical things, which he was quite capable of doing and wrote about,
Hmm.
he had stacks of books in Spanish referring to the histories of things and
Hmm.
stuff. Like he had just, in fact, I had to toss a lot of stuff because I had no space for it after the fact. But
Right.
um, if I would have had space, I would have done so and held it. So he could do so. Yes, you can have access to information in English, in Spanish. You can find endless books
Hmm.
explaining the history of the United States and so on and so forth. I guess what I'm getting at it, with all that going around town to get to it, there's a difference between and this place where there's so much Spanish and going to a little town somewhere um, on the border of Colorado and whatever.
Yes.
Um, in order for a family, let's say, of Cuban exiles that just arrived, let's say,
Hmm.
if they go there, the weight
Hmm.
of what is needed in order for them to move around that town
Right.
is greatly more
Right.
difficult than if they just stay in Hialeah or Little
Yeah.
Havana or whatever. Because at least here, you have a distributed English, Spanish,
Hmm.
and this and that. Over there, if you want to
Maybe not
communicate,
so much. Yes.
exactly, yeah,
Well, that I agree with you, and I think the environment is going to dictate that, and that's why you have heavy concentrations like out here, Los Angeles. Well, the big cities, almost all of the big cities out here that I can think of in Washington, Oregon, California, have a Chinatown, quote unquote. And that's because these people didn't speak English. They kind of flocked together and they hung together because they didn't struggle to communicate. And Southern California is another example of that. There are huge swaths of that area where Spanish is the predominant language and English is the minority language. So it's very easy to live there your whole life and never speak a word of English, like you're talking about Hialeah. And my image of Hialeah, the only thing I knew about Hialeah before you and I started talking was I knew there was a horse racetrack there. That's all I knew about it because I had heard about that in pop culture in old movies like the Marx Brothers and what have you, talking about Hialeah racetrack. Other than that, didn't know anything. I didn't even know it was a town. I thought it was the name of the track.
yeah,
But yeah, there are areas where you can go in just about every state out here in the West and not ever speak English in your life. But again, that's environment. If you do go to Colorado or Arizona or Wyoming or Montana or what have you, you're going to need to learn some English to get along, even on a rudimentary level, you know, to be able to ask what aisle bread is on, you
yeah.
know.
I mean, if one goes to Canada, well,
Hmm.
you've got the English part done. They may ask themselves, well, why did they use these few words to describe this thing, they must not be Canadian then. But you could still, so if you speak with a Canadian, you're still speaking. They may, or a British person. There will be sets of words that
Sure.
describe things that may have a variation,
Hmm.
but you're in the ballpark to a great degree, and hence you can
Sure.
buy those rims for your car or that new hose for your
But
garden.
whether you call it pop, soda, soda pop, or Coke, if I say to somebody, let's go get a pop, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If I say to a Canadian, you want a soda, they know what I mean. We may have regional differences and regional accents or dialects, but we still have that common language that for the most part we can communicate. They may have words for that, like a toque. I have never used the word toque other than in conversations and talking about this subject in my life. I call it a knit cap or a beanie hat. It just depends. Or a stocking cap. I have
let,
never used the word toque to describe this hat, you
let
know.
me give you a different variation too on the thing of
Mhm.
this language situation too. Like I told you about the guy that couldn't speak Spanish either. I don't speak
Mhm.
Spanish,
Yeah.
and that was one situation
Mhm.
in which I found curious. I was going to tell you yesterday, but we didn't end up doing a thing. I've also run into situations where, because it is what it is over here. This is, I'm giving you little snapshots of
Mhm.
how odd, and even for myself, it's odd. I'm constantly jaw dropped on the intro. It just, yeah. So and not in a negative or positive way. It just in a experience, in a way, just the experience of the different variations. So I've even faced situations where I'm like at a register.
Mhm.
I strike up a conversation with the lady,
Mhm.
which is a primarily Spanish speaking person with
Mhm.
very limited English whatnot.
Mhm.
And I'll go to the register and I'll say, in Spanish, oh, how are you? This and that. Oh, yeah, it's a great day. And things are expensive in Spanish. And she's quite comfortable. And there's a flow.
Mhm.
And there's just, it's almost like a calm afternoon waves on the shore.
Dude,
And
I
then
get it. I get it.
and then the yeah, just the and then the bagging person is a young
Mhm.
person,
Mhm.
and I'll turn my head to the young person and say, "Hey, thanks a lot, appreciate it very much," in
Mhm.
English, and the
Mhm.
lady's face will have the same face that that guy in the truck had.
Mhm. Like,
Because
why'd you
here's the,
switch to English? Mm.
and it's almost like a reality border.
Mhm.
What precedes doing that
Mhm.
from the person's perception is that I thought I was speaking to someone at this level
Mhm.
with this type of background, with this type of understanding,
Mhm.
and they didn't have. Now I'm seeing they have access to something that I don't have. Not that it's better or worse.
Mhm.
They are now perceiving you with an additional quality that previously you did not have in their eyes.
And it
They
could
because
be
here's
good
the,
or bad.
yeah, it's irrelevant whether it's good or bad. The
Mhm.
key here is, here's the key. When you encounter a person, broadly speaking,
Mhm.
we have no frickin' idea their potential or capacity,
Mhm.
understanding, none of it. We have none, even though our instincts baked into us are to quickly make judgment calls on
Sure.
all sorts of things without us even thinking.
Mhm.
We
Well,
do not
that's survival, yeah.
we do not know the capacity that the person in front of us lacks,
Hmm.
or is abundant in, or
Hmm.
somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Although we have instincts to sort of lay it out, our assumptions, the the problem is not self-real, in my opinion, is not self-realizing that we have an instinct, but it itself is should be viewed as on pause before we know extra information. So we have the layout of, okay, I think this is
Right.
this is what I'm dealing with here. But okay, those are options. But before you jump that freaking shark, um, further information is needed. But people do that automatically, and so when those things contradict, some people don't know that their spider senses
Hmm.
are a skill in waiting for the ultimate result of the interaction. They assume and they think their assumption is correct without further additional. And so that's when you see the face with the deer
Well,
in the headlight look.
but you're talking yourself into a corner here because what made you think that you needed to speak English to the bagger? Aren't you kind of doing the same thing, making a snap judgment that they probably don't know Spanish?
No, because they're a young person,
Hmm.
and whether I speak Spanish or so, no, understand what I'm saying. Yeah, that's great. I'm not speaking. So when I speak to the lady,
Hmm.
I am under no contractual obligation or what or other
Hmm.
to speak to her in Spanish. I could
Understood.
just as easily.
Well, I'm just trying to wrap my head around because I'm not bilingual. Okay. And
Right.
I think it's fascinating to me how someone can go and think in one language for several minutes and then turn around and switch to another language. To me, there's a fascination there. Okay.
Well, let me answer the
Because
question.
because I don't understand how a person can do it because I'm not I don't know another language good enough to do it.
Well, let me
But
answer the question. I have to decide
mhm,
one way or the other to speak a language.
yeah,
It makes no
obviously, yeah.
because you have to communicate the
Hmm.
transaction. It makes no difference whether you choose English or Spanish, basically,
Hmm.
because it's going to be either or on a sliding scale. I mean, she could
Right.
speak Cantonese, but I'm talking about the knowns
Yeah.
here. We live in Miami. There's a
Sure.
high prevalence of, and every day after day, you learn the fact that the bag ladies all speak Spanish, and that's basically true,
Yeah.
because you have a trajectory, and the bag people you realize on a day-to-day basis are younger kids that basically are bilingual, so
Mm.
they speak both English and Spanish.
Okay.
But
Well,
the younger kids usually feel more comfortable speaking
with
English,
English.
like
Okay.
myself,
Okay.
like I grew up. So there's all that.
That's perfectly valid because I know my old neighbor Martin, who no longer he moved to another city. Um, he had one son that didn't speak Spanish very much at all. He knew a little bit, but I mean, born here, went through American schools, stuff like that. Mexican father, Mexican mother, but he wasn't comfortable. He wasn't fluent in it.
Yeah.
And he had zero accent. Well, he had this Pacific Northwest regional accent that some people say they can hear. I don't hear one, but whatever. So, so
Yeah.
I get that. I can see that.
Well, that was me.
So,
Whatever
mhm,
his son was, that was me growing up.
mhm.
Except that I don't know what level of non-Spanish he had. I had sufficient level of Spanish with errors put in that were enough that made the people that spoke Spanish mostly
Mhm.
correct me
Yeah,
a lot,
yeah.
because
Well,
there's a complication with it too. Um, when you have the two, well, I mean, there's people that perfectly speak a
yeah.
secondary language and their
Mhm.
home
Well,
language.
yeah. I mean, correcting is good so long as they're not, humiliating you about it. I mean, correcting is good.
No, no. The point is proficiency.
Hmm.
So there's also the proficiency thing.
Yeah.
If you, so so like us, what we're talking about now.
Hmm.
I mean, it's neither. It's not something out of this world. I mean, we are talking about little intricate little things,
Mm-hmm.
um, culturally, linguistically, and
Mm-hmm.
just all these things. But if I were to try to do that in Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been practicing for the past 3 years, 4 years now since we
Mm-hmm.
started the whole thing. I've been practicing Spanish so that I could not be just basic. I'm not trying to oversell the basic, but
Mm-hmm.
if I tried to do what we're doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
try to share a concept that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of complicated, but it's not. But yes, it is. I may miss the mark a lot
Mm-hmm.
or sufficiently that it would be best for me not to go in the direction we've gone tonight
Yeah.
in
Okay.
Spanish.
I see. I get. Yeah. I totally get that. I totally get that.
It
You
would
know,
be because I'm missing, what would you call it? What do you call it? Just the text of it. The I don't have the
the
syntax,
vocabulary.
the vocabulary.
Yeah, and without studying, you probably wouldn't. Why would you?
You would need it.
And that's me. When the whole time we lived in Germany, I had the vocabulary of maybe a 4 year old, maybe a 4 year old,
Yeah.
and I knew that, and I had to try to work with it. But I was always surprised at the people who spoke English. Give you an example. There's Linda and I have a mutual friend who got us together, as a matter of fact, and bugged me until I asked Linda out, which I wanted to do, but she was dating somebody else. That's another story. Um, she was German, and she kept telling us about this place, this guest house she was part owner of at the time. And when she went into the army, the US Army, she sold out and this, that, and the other. And we happened to be in that town and we looked for that guest house. We went in, sat down. I ordered a drink. Linda ordered a drink. And we were telling the lady there, um, she came out from behind the bar to service. And we were telling her that we knew in our broken German, we knew this woman. And she, okay. And she could see us struggling with our German. She switched to better English than I have, just like that. I mean, just so how's she doing? Where the hell did that come from? Now we can have a conversation. She had no issues at all. And when she spoke English, she had no accent at all. None. I don't know where she went to school. I don't know if she came to the US and spent some time here or what, but she had no accent. And it was that happened more often than I can count. And I always tried at that time, I always tried to get a little bit more information. I went to a bicycle shop one day and I needed an inner tube. I didn't know the word for inner tube. So I took the old one with me, went into the bicycle shop. Ich brauche das. I don't remember. And the guy looked at me and he says, "Okay, you want one of these?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "What kind of valve do you want?" I went, "There's a different kind of valve." I just kind of leaned forward. Yeah. And he went over and he got two inner tubes and he showed me, he said, "Oh, that one." I said, "Okay, what is this in German, please? So I don't look stupid again." And he got a smile on his face and he gave me a little brief lesson. I tried to do that everywhere I could when I found somebody who spoke English and knew exactly what I was talking about. I want to be able to communicate again, you know. So it was a learning experience for me, and that's what built up my 4 year old vocabulary because it sure wasn't school. In school, you learn I would like some bread and cheese, uh, stuff you're never going to use out in the real world, you know.
What happens is that there's a little bit of the, I don't want to call it cradling, but taking the path of least resistance
Mm-hmm.
in terms of you have an influx of people speaking a language
Mhm.
in an area, but you have people that were there prior that speak the language.
Mhm.
And so the people coming in don't have the same dual linguistic ability
Right.
as the people that have been long standing in the area.
Mhm.
And so the people that are long standing in the area, when they see these new people coming in and can tell by the signals of their lack of specificness in the way they speak English,
Mhm.
they will oblige the newcomers by making the transaction easier and just shooting it off in Spanish as an example,
Mhm.
facilitating the new people and
Yes.
getting their asses out the door so the next person comes around. And so what ends up happening is you have this um helping in that way because the interest of the interaction is for it to go smooth, but there's a secondary necessity. It's probably a primary necessity, broadly speaking, which is to be fluent in the language of the place that you're at. But people will oblige for to facilitate the exiting, enter and exiting of a transaction.
Right.
And what ends up happening is that that goes over generations, and it builds momentum in terms of, like, it it entrenches two languages in the case of South Florida, um by
And
people being not complacent. I don't want to say complacent, but like they're saying,
comfortable.
yeah, we get what you want. We're gonna say it to you in Spanish because why are we gonna drag this one out? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
So
not only that, it makes good business sense because your customers are comfortable communicating with you in a language they know and understand.
right, right,
It makes excellent business sense.
but the idea it does, but the idea that I'm getting at is that that is how the propagation or reinforcement
Mhm.
of Spanish and this duality of these two languages
Mhm.
uh, become entrenched, where
Yeah.
you have staples of English
Mhm.
being interwoven with Spanish. So you end up with a segment of society that
Mhm.
is perfectly well. Here's what you end up with in Miami, and I think this is anywhere, but a segment of society that speaks English only, and that's a minority.
Mhm.
Over here, that's a minority
And it makes
by a
perfect
lot.
sense. It makes perfect sense to me.
So there's that. The
Mhm.
next category is people that are bilingual,
Mhm.
English and or Spanish in this case,
Mhm.
and those are the majority.
Mhm. And
Then
and
you
you
have a
can see how that would be.
and then you have the third category, which are those that speak only Spanish. So you
Mhm.
have those three things, and there's all in betweens. But so
Sure.
you have that now the people in the middle with the English, or the majority with the English
Mhm.
and Spanish, like myself.
Mhm.
If you break that down, you have people, unlike myself, that are proficient to the level of exquisite detail in both English and Spanish.
Mhm.
Then you have people like me that I can colloquially and some advanced ability to say things that are beyond I'd like to pay for the pizza in cash and so on. Um, I can do a little bit more, but not like someone that's proficient. They can sit and read volumes of, and so you have a variation within that bilingual as well. You know, and then you have on both ends. There's people that speak the English that have minimal
Mhm.
um, Spanish, but they can do, and so that's the tapestry in which
Yeah.
a lot of curious things occur in this
And,
area.
and that's becoming more and more prevalent on the West Coast. That
Yeah,
is becoming more and more prevalent. Um, there are far more uh, people that you wouldn't think spoke Spanish, folks that
that
look
do.
like me, that do, or at least know enough, at least know a little bit. But it's commonplace now. I mean, happens all the time. Uh, when I was in real estate, our receptionist, she spoke English and Spanish. She was more blonde than I am and had neon blue eyes. She could switch into Spanish just at the snap of a finger, absolutely fluent. But that was her job. She had to, and she knew the real estate agents who could speak Spanish, and she would get a hold of one of them if the people didn't speak English. And that's become more and more common all the time. I can't think of a bank or a doctor's office where at least half of the people there don't speak Spanish as well as English.
Yeah, it's a big minority in the
So it's
country, and
yeah,
so and there's money to be had with that, and services and so on. So and having two languages is better than having one
yeah. Well,
in a general sense, you
I
know.
don't know what it's like now, but it used to be required when I was going through school. You had to take a foreign language. You had to take one full year of a foreign language.
I took French,
I
and I
took
did not. It was difficult.
I took what they called an exploratory class in junior high in 8th grade, where we had yeah, well, it was we took French, Spanish, and German, and I decided I liked German the best. So I took more German when I got into high school, and then satisfied my year. That was it. I had to have a year of it, and then I didn't take any more. Then I was a middle of my sophomore year. We moved up here, and I already had the German behind me, so I didn't have to take it again. So but I didn't follow through. And I didn't know that I was going to be sent to Germany in the army. So I had to back up and regroup and kind of try to remember what I had learned in high school 10 years earlier and just never used and promptly forgot most of.
Yeah,
So,
it's an interesting. I've never read a book in Spanish. I've read plenty of
mhm.
baptismal records and death records, though, and
Yeah.
marriage records. But and by the way, even something as repetitive as that
Hmm.
is good. It helps,
Yeah.
but I've never sat and read some for entertainment, like a some sort of novel or some
You
sort of thing like that.
so you've never had an inkling to sit down and read one of your granduncle's books,
No,
Mateo's books?
I have. I've read those, but those are under the category of genealogy. So it'll say
Well, it's
X.
nonfiction, but yeah.
No, no. Well, so the books that I've read are basically like the book that I wrote. That's a directory of data.
Oh, okay. All right.
So it's kind of like that. Now he did write books. Like I've read articles,
Hmm.
but the idea of sitting with like a Beatles book
Hmm.
for the sheer joy of it
In
and to
Spanish.
picture it in your mind and stuff like that
Hmm.
activity of really letting it just you're swimming with that, you're
Hmm.
swimming down that river
Hmm.
and the images are just flowing because you're reading it, and it's
Yeah.
that is a different skill. You have
Hmm.
to, you
Yeah. I
know what I'm
agree.
saying?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree because I can read some German, but I can't lose myself in a German book. You
Yeah,
know,
because you don't have the
even
skill to.
right, Uh, and or nor the ability, the vocabulary to pick up on the nuances and the intent.
One
You know.
generation behind me,
Hmm.
my parents and my grandparents
Hmm.
would have done the same in reverse. Instead of with English, with
Hmm.
Spanish. They would have sat with books.
Hmm.
That's just one different generation removed,
Yeah.
and I am the reverse of that.
Yeah.
That's how quick, even amongst a
Well,
society localized as Miami is, with the strong Spanish influence, um, even with that, you get people like myself.
well, and that's the way Martin was with his son. He didn't force him to learn Spanish. I'm not here to teach you how to speak. That's what school is for. We teach you words, and you hear us speak. But Martin he spoke Spanish to his wife and her mother, but he spoke English to everybody else that I was aware of. That
Yeah.
anytime I was around, it was English. They'd be out talking, in his yard or something. I'd pull up and Hey, Mark, how you doing? Hey, Martine, how's it going on? You know, that
I
thing.
guess what I'm I guess the point is that I'm trying to go after is that just that one quick
Hmm.
generation succeeding the next
Yeah.
just by sheer location and environment. You have a different, that guy called Vivek Ramaswamy.
Mm-mm.
He's one of the candidates on
Oh,
the
oh, oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
he his ancestry is of Indian
Hmm.
background.
Hmm.
And if you listen to him speak for any amount of time, the only conclusion I come across or end up with is that he's probably more American than many in conscience, in background, uh, in understanding principles. Now he is incredibly and apparently strikingly brilliant that he can put pieces of scattered puzzle pieces together to understand. But he's if you listen to him just on what comes out of his mouth, well, in my opinion, all things being equal, he's no different than what the founding fathers would have said. I'm not saying in a political sense. I'm just saying in a
Uh,
knowledge based
as a
cultural
person,
thing.
yeah.
What comes out of his mouth,
Hmm.
the reasoning behind him, the understanding is as American as Benjamin Franklin pushing a
Yeah,
dolly across Philadelphia full of newspapers.
yeah.
Um, and he's probably a first generation American.
I don't know if he is or not, but I have noticed it's been my experience. You're first generation American,
Mhm.
okay? You're not the first generation American I've met and conversed with at length. It's been my experience that is typical of first generation Americans, that they know their stuff.
Interesting.
It's been my experience that a first generation American knows more about America than a fifth or sixth or seventh generation American does.
That's an interesting take.
Now, I've not met every first generation American in the country, obviously, but it's been my experience that more often than not, they know more about America than people whose families have been here for 100 years or more.
There's a guy, he's a first generation American as well. There's a lot of those. Um, and
Yeah.
he is of Polish background.
Mm-hmm.
And his name is Luke something. And he's a journalist. And he also has that quality of Americanness
Mm-hmm. Understanding, yeah.
and very accentuated in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's been a journalist and gotten arrested many times because he's on this kick about freedom,
Mm-hmm.
individual liberties, and such. And I think that this, in his situation, well, Poland got really beat to shreds
Mm-hmm.
and people lost their lives. And he's derived from that in
Mm-hmm.
his previous generation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the appreciation of my father used to say it. I left my country to because if I would not have, he said something to the effect of, I had to rescue myself from my head departing from my shoulders.
Yeah.
Um, the idea that an imposition by people wanting to control,
Put him against the wall, basically.
yeah, these concepts are fresh in the minds of and
Mm-hmm.
inherited onto these first generation Americans coming from wherever they. I mean, I met a person in California. His name was, I forget his name now. So, but he was from China
Mm-hmm.
and had been here 30 years or something. and he told me the story how he came here. He said I had to leave China because that was, and I stowed away in a boat.
Yeah.
And that guy believed in the principles,
Hmm.
and so there's a lot of that, and so maybe that you said aligns with what I'm saying here.
Well, you're an example of it. You know more about America than a lot of people your age, just simply because of the environment you grew up in your household. You heard they weren't talking to you, but you heard the stories.
Yeah,
You
you just
read the
suck it
books,
up.
you read the documents, you absorbed that
Yeah,
atmosphere.
you have
And
no choice, right, of wherever
well,
you're.
and your dad kind of instilled that sense into you too. Well, I've noticed that with other people. When I was stationed at Fort Ord, California, there was a guy in my unit. We teased him about being a Russian spy. He was born in Latvia in the Soviet Union. And as a baby, his parents somehow managed to escape and made their way through San Francisco. And he grew up on the West Coast of the US, but he was born over there. And I guess it was about he'd been there at Fort Ord for about a year and a half. And we were at morning formation, head count, all this, and we're standing there, and all of a sudden the commander calls us to attention, and he called him out of the formation up in front of the entire unit, made him turn around and face us, and then said that over the weekend, this was a Monday morning, he said over the weekend he took the oath he has become an American citizen. And the whole formation just exploded. I mean, and that's, you don't do that. You just don't do that. And cheered him and yay and all this stuff. And he turned 15 different colors of red, but he's standing at attention. He couldn't move. He couldn't say anything. Everybody calmed down and went back to attention. And but that guy talking to him later on, again, he knew more about the country than most folks his age who had been here for a while. And he wasn't even first generation American. His kids will be. I'm sure he's got kids by now because, God, this was 40 years ago, 30 years ago. But it that has been the case that I've just noticed over the years. And it didn't strike me until you and I were just talking about it.
Mark, could could you read some questions off? I can hear you from. I got to use the restroom very quickly.
Okay, we can do that. Um, Jim Dockrell says that's profiling and that just ain't right. Well, sometimes profiling is what saves you. Profiling is what keeps you from picking up the hitchhiker who's carrying a chainsaw wearing a hockey mask. Okay. Now, I know people wearing hockey masks up there where you're at is not rare, but still, they don't have running chainsaws and a sledgehammer named Luella. Let's see here. What else we got going? There's not a whole heck of a lot to read. Um, Linda says I can speak a bit of Spanish, a little more German, but I'm fluent in pidgin and redneck. Yep, yep. I'm very fluent in redneck. My mother and my grandmother were from Texas, so I am fluent in y'all. Trust me. So let's see here. Linda's asking, remember the horse people went to the birthday party? Yes, we were stationed over in Germany. And this was one of those weird experiences. Linda was out. Linda and I don't remember why you were down there. You were just walking around the little town we lived in. And these people were either loading or unloading a horse from a horse trailer. And you noticed they had uh, Linda noticed they had a Western saddle on this horse. And most Europeans use an English saddle. And she said something out loud about, oh, a Western saddle. And these people, their heads spun around and they immediately got interested. You know how to ride Western? And yeah, and next thing you know, Linda and this woman are fast friends. And it was just simply because Linda said something out loud about a Western saddle. And uh, her fiance at the time, his name was Friedrich, her name was Uli. His family owned a winery, a vineyard and winery there in a little town called Ingelheim, right on the Rhine River, that had been in the family for 700 years. And it was the oldest continuously running winery in that town, or I think in the region, but I may be wrong. And he had been sent to school in the US for vineyard operations and winery operations. And he came up through the ranks with Paul Masson in California, and spent so many years over there in the US. He's another one of those people that had no accent. He'd speak German to his friends, turn around, look at us, and did you get enough to eat? Oh yeah, yeah, thank you. That kind of thing. We just knew
Interesting.
the customs, knew everything, and switch over just at a moment's notice. Just, oh wow, okay.
If you absorb the basic,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's natural or I don't know what it would be like when it's baked in that you have knowledge baked in of two cultures because you just grow up in it. It's
Mm-hmm.
just natural. And I
Yeah.
think if they would have taken you as an
Mm-hmm.
example and they would have you would have been you would have been born and grown up here,
Mm-hmm.
um you would probably, well, then again, over there there's Spanish, but
Yeah, but I wasn't immersed in it like you were. You were immersed in it due to the environment.
yeah.
Um, Everybody around you was in a similar situation, and your parents spoke Spanish and your grandparents spoke Spanish, all your
Yeah, so that's
relatives.
different. Yeah.
So you were immersed in it. I wasn't immersed in it. Now, if I would have grown up, for instance, weird thing, if I'm your cousin and lived in the next town over or even halfway across town from you, I'd have been just, I'd have been the same.
Yeah, if you would have grown up instead of me, it would
Hmm.
have been you in my exact well, there would be different variations, but
Sure.
you would have picked up the both cultural things
Hmm.
like I did to whatever degree. So
Yeah.
it has a lot to it seems obvious that if you take a kid from
Hmm.
anywhere and you have them grow up in, I don't know, China
Hmm.
or wherever, obviously they sponge up the local whatnots, and that is how people culturalize in one area or the other. Yeah.
Well, it's also immersion in that that's the best way that the to teach a person, for instance, a foreign language. Um, for example, there's a school in Monterey, California. It's a U.S. Army. Well, it's Army run, but it's called the Defense Language Institute. And you can go there to learn a foreign language, to be an intelligence analyst or things like that. And the only time they speak English to you is the first day. You get in, you get your assignment, you're assigned your room, you're assigned your classes and all that other stuff. After that, there is no English. You live and breathe the language you're there to learn. And that's the only way to teach people. Kids will pick up languages a hell of a lot easier than adults will. And that's the only way to kickstart an adult is to take away that mother language and train them in the language they're attempting to learn. And it works. So much so, when we were stationed over in Hawaii, there was a brand new program they were trying. They did, it was the case. It's less the case now. The Hawaiian language was dying out. And it was mainly because it wasn't taught in the schools. Well, there were several schools. They were trying it as a pilot program, 3 or 4 schools, where You registered, you went to class, they taught in Hawaiian. You learned Hawaiian. They knew you would keep using English outside of the school, but you were going to be taught in Hawaiian. And it's been successful. In fact, the number of schools has multiplied exponentially. And it basically saved the language from dying.
Interesting.
So,
Um, I'm gonna branch into a little thing. See what
okay.
you think.
Yeah, we've been going for 2 hours, so yeah, it's time to branch.
Well, it's still within the ballpark, but not really. But
Okay.
yes, but well, not really. I don't know. You'll tell me what you think. I ran across this guy, an American guy. He was born in California somewhere. He's in his 70s at this point.
Mhm.
But he lived somewhere in the Midwest, and he's been on about writing a theory of everything.
Okay.
The theory of everything, something to that effect. And his IQ has been reported at above 200.
Jeez.
So, in theory, a person with 100 IQ, in theory, because we don't know exactly if it's true or not, but we can extrapolate. A person with 100 IQ interacting with a person of 200 or 120 or 130
Hmm.
or 140 or 150 or whatever above him, there is a limit to what that person of 100 IQ can understand from coming from that person of 120. Even though we live in the same reality,
Hmm.
all of us do, there are concepts that are beyond the reach of that one person. It's not readily available to them. They just don't reach that within a spectrum.
Hmm.
So there's things that people understand that is beyond the reach of certain amounts of people just because of the complication of whatever it is. Beyond interest,
Hmm.
the ability to be able to process it if
Right.
needed
To
is not
understand it, yes.
is not available. Um, and that applies to all of us.
Hmm.
So and that ceiling that everybody, you and I, whatever our personal ceilings are, um, we can't perceive it. I can't perceive because to know beyond what I know
Hmm.
or am capable of knowing is unreachable for me.
Well, we all process information differently.
No, no. Okay. So
So,
yeah, we do,
hmm,
and yet we don't. We all process information similarly as well. It's both
hmm,
true and false. But there's a level beyond which we don't know that other people may know,
hmm,
and we don't have access to even understand that we don't know,
right.
which is screwed up. Just thinking about it is screwed up because there
Well,
is a ceiling.
hmm,
There is a ceiling. It may not be it may not be dry cut in all areas, but there's a ceiling somewhere
hmm,
that I can't perceive because beyond that would mean that I would have to be able to perceive more
hmm,
beyond the power that I have the ability to perceive. So there's that. This guy is at 200 roughly,
hmm.
they say, and he did a theory of everything.
Okay.
Um, and he gets into it. And I was watching his thing, um, and I was like, wow, this is some crazy stuff. And so he gets into the theory of reality and the choices and just a bunch of different things, you know. And I'm seeing it and the explanations and stuff. Um, and I'm like, man, this guy, he's got all these ideas, and this is like freaking incredible stuff. And he's using mathematical whatnots,
Hmm.
and the mathematical whatnots are mathematical whatnots to me because I do
Yeah.
not have the training.
Yeah. I can't look at a formula and tell you if it's right or wrong. No. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I gotta
But
take your word for it. Yeah.
right, or not. But
Hmm.
verbalizing the
Hmm.
concepts, I can sort of puzzle them together to see what the guy is saying. Well, go ahead.
And that's key. You have to be able to do that. It's one thing to have a 200 IQ, but if you can't explain it to a person who doesn't have that IQ, then what good is it? You have
It's
to be able to communicate.
well, see, I don't. So you have to be able to communicate if your desired outcome is to
To
communicate it,
inform. Yeah.
and and but if the information requires what it requires,
Mhm.
and what it requires cannot be. So I agree with you that the best. I'm on 100% on your side in the basic idea that if I have an idea, regardless of what it might be, let's say complicated or whatever it might be, if I can't transmit that idea
Mhm.
so that it's done in the simplest form that anybody can take it and put it in a little, write it on a little paper,
Well,
and put it in their pocket and be able to transmit it on their own, then it's limited to just me thinking about it or
right.
whatever, this or that. So yeah, but what I'm saying is that in certain, there are certain things that require a lot of pieces to be put together to see a
Right.
big tapestry that's unavailable to, let's say, myself.
Mhm.
It's unavailable, and I would not know that it's unavailable
Right.
to me because I would not have, at whatever level that might be,
Mhm.
I would not have that much above that to be
Mhm.
able to stitch that together in whatever field or whatever. Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so but this guy's on that level roughly,
Mhm.
whatever, and he's explaining things, and we can sort of like he extrapolates the ideas and stuff.
Okay.
Um, and so he talked about a lot of things that basically fall into the direction of, well, I'll say, um, he 100% believes
Mhm.
that God exists,
Okay.
and this is a brilliant guy. And one of the arguments that he uses, and I'm simplifying it,
Mhm.
is that, well, he uses a bunch of arguments, but one of the arguments he uses is that a lot of people that are brilliant in academia and this and that,
Mhm.
um, outright reject that because they can't bottle it and process it. And he says, no, 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 that's all wrong. And he goes on explaining it. Um, and it gets really complicated. But and I'm not going to be able to unless I sat down and worked on. But I'll just say this: it's similar to the idea of the double slit experiment, which is
Mhm.
monumental, in at least from my vantage point, where they took photons
Mhm.
and shot them at a slit,
Right.
and it formed the pattern. And then they did two slits and they shot photons, one photon at a time. And what they realized is that when a camera was placed on it, the photon would choose whatever would go through one slit, not the other. But when the observer, the person observing, saw it, oh, actually, I'm sorry, it's not. The photons would split evenly. When the
Mhm.
observer viewed it and they shot the photon,
Mhm.
the light decided to make a choice. But without you observing it, it fanned out.
Mhm.
And one of the conclusions that people have come to, and they're fighting it because that's a big implication.
Mhm.
It reality requires us to observe it
Right.
in order for a progression to occur, a decision to. We are the ones, and so he goes on about that. We are the ones that are causing the next step, the a particular direction.
Mhm.
And in that big soup mess of stuff is the concept of God exists. And it's problematic for a lot of scientists because they don't want to say that because there's this, and so there's this whole to do and this and that. Um, the reason I'm bringing all this up is that I was watching it. I was like, man, this is some good stuff, and this, and that. And he's a brilliant guy. They say I don't know, but
Mhm.
it appears that he's a brilliant guy. And then I saw another video of him, and I clicked on it, and he goes into this whole bunch of conspiracy theories. And I'm like, oh man. And see, here's the thing: I will indulge in conspiracy theories, but you'll never hear me. I've never said when we've talked about either lizard
Mhm.
people or be it like
Mhm.
flat Earth or these things. I'm saying it as a curiosity. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm fighting it to see how far we can push it,
Mhm.
but I'm not telling you, hey, dude, lizard people freaking exist. I've never said that to you.
No, I know.
No, I know you know, but I'm saying that
Mhm.
I'm just playing with the idea, but I'm pausing at saying, hey, let's stamp that one as true,
Mhm.
by far. But I'm playing with the idea. Why not play with the idea? Let's see what's there and stuff. But that doesn't mean that I'm accepting it as truth.
Yeah.
Um, but this guy was going on about some conspiracy stuff, dude. Not lizard people, but
Mhm.
and I was shocked, dude, because I'm like, how can you arrive at a yes on these things? And maybe it's that maybe I don't have access, but
Just
let's
some
not,
information. Yeah.
I may not have access, but it's if it was readily available to the average person. But here's the thing: he said something that I do have somewhat access to a fair amount, and he basically said the following, which I wholeheartedly somebody can contradict me, and let's see if it's true. He said that there's a conspiracy to eliminate white people as opposed to black people and as opposed to Hispanic people using medicines,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
recent, like that whole thing. And I couldn't believe it. This is supposed to be a brilliant guy, which I'm not doubting that he is,
Mhm.
but there's a problem here. And the problem is I have studied as a novice these things about inheritance,
Mhm.
genetics, and whatnot in a novice way. But
Mhm.
novice way is sufficient to understand the key points, which I've mentioned to you a million and a half times. There's
Mhm.
no such thing as a genetic tapestry that is unique to white people, which actually are actually truly French people that are not like English people that are not like frickin' people from Kosovo. That this concept. So his prejudice. I'm not saying prejudice in a bad way in terms of like, oh, I hate these people or like these people.
No, his scientific
His
prejudice. Yeah.
assumptions, yes,
Mhm.
is that here you have a group that's white people that we can attack with medicine that would affect these people and not the other people because these people genetically are unique than these other people. That I can say, and the information is clearly out that that's not true.
Yeah.
There is no medicine. There's degrees, but there's no quality genetically that differentiates a Native American. There's no unavailable data inside
Mhm.
the genetics of a Native American that's not available in a European person.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist, and there's no such thing as a Hispanic um, um, category in a genetic sense that would affect if you wanted to target Hispanics. Um, that says this is the quality of Hispanics genetically,
Mhm.
and we can affect that without it affecting all other groups because all other groups share the same
Mhm.
availability of genetics. Um,
Yeah.
and whatever. So the point is that I saw that from this guy that's supposed to be brilliant, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
but maybe there's something I don't have access to that he does because he's 200 plus IQ and who knows what the hell.
Well, it just depends also on environment, you know. I mean, maybe he reads all the medical documents. Maybe he reads all the studies. Maybe he reads all the clinical data. Maybe he's, privy to things that, maybe is available to us, but just we would consider it dry as hell. Have you ever sat down and read a medical study?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
many
like
times.
watching paint dry. You
Unless
know,
unless the what you're reading
it's
pertains
really
to
something that you're into. Yeah.
yeah. Well, what I've the problem with that concept is
Hmm.
what prevails in the United States under that category of race, which I've touched upon with you for a
Yeah.
long, many times.
Hmm.
The problem is that you have a political, social concept,
Hmm.
which is the norm that we all, oh, you have white people, and then you have the Hispanic people, and then you have the black people, you have the Indian people. That is childish
Hmm.
in a genetic sense. In a cultural sense,
It's completely different.
it's
Yes.
a paradigm that we all inhabit, um, but it's not a medical reality.
Right.
It's not a medical reality. Why? Because so what I'm saying is that how can this brilliant guy? There's enough evidence for the local normal human being to understand that his assumptions of this conspiracy theory that they're targeting white people and this and that, as
Hmm.
if white people have a this block of genes
Hmm.
that
That they
pertain
can
to them,
attack. Yeah.
that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well.
And it doesn't exist in just to end the thing, it doesn't exist is because any gene, so it comes down to this. I'll just say this. It's the concept of the looks determine a race and therefore it has a genetic component. It does, but it doesn't have a genetic component sufficient that not that other people don't share in those components. It's just not it just doesn't appear on the physical, but
Hmm.
inside behind the hood,
Yeah.
all genes available to some guy from Utah is available in some guy in the Congo, baked in their genetics. It's just the ordering of how those genetics
Hmm.
stacked up due to inheritance throughout
Yeah.
the millennia.
Hmm.
The ordering of it, but the ordering of it still has the same components. So if you attack a white guy in Utah genetically, chemic or
Yeah.
biologically, that same thing. I mean, a 1-to-1 is different, but population wise, you're gonna affect people outside of each perceived race.
Hmm.
Human beings come from the same and so anyways, the point is that this brilliant guy doesn't know that.
Well.
Either he's not as brilliant as one thinks, or he's brilliant in his specific area and assumes he's brilliant in others. What's going on?
And that's where you get into other things. That's why you have to examine the entire thing, because he may be brilliant in that one specific discipline. And because he is brilliant in that specific discipline, he thinks he's brilliant everywhere. You have to look at ego, you have to look at what's in it for him, be it personally, financially,
That's a good point too.
prestige. I mean, the ego is a wild, wild, wild thing.
That's another
And
problem. Yep.
you know, I mean, is he angling for a Nobel Prize? Has he already won one and he's shooting for two? I mean, or is he just out to get attention?
If I were
I
tomorrow,
mean,
if I tomorrow, as an example, it could be
mhm,
anybody, said, all right, I'm going to do the snake oil.
mhm,
I'm going to present myself as 200 IQ. I'm not saying this is true for him, but
mhm,
I'm just saying if I'm going to present myself as high IQ, I'm going to anybody can take English, the English language, and
mhm,
formulate something so complex that makes no freaking that makes some sort of sense, but there's a little bit of you can dress yourself as something that you're not,
mhm.
present it to people as a snake oil, people buy it because also there's something about people like
Well,
making go ahead.
certain titles are also demand instant respect as well.
That's
I
right.
mean, we know logically, we know doctors are just people,
Yeah.
but doctors have a certain level of respect
Yeah.
just because we kind of put that almost a saint-like quality on a doctor because we rely heavily on them when things in our bodies aren't going right.
Right.
So when you put the word doctor in front of somebody's name, there's an instant uptick in
Elevation.
the
Yeah.
respect. And the
Yeah.
same with professor.
Yeah. They
When
know something that we don't have
exactly.
access to, and wow. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, Linda says it here, just because someone has a high IQ does not mean they're not an idiot. You
Well,
know,
that's a
having a
problem.
whole bunch of letters behind your name doesn't mean you're smart.
No, but I got a problem with that.
Vocabulary and syntax, or the lack thereof. Unlettered does not mean stupid. Vocabulary and syntax doesn't necessarily mean smart or dumb. I mean,
No,
I've
no,
seen
no.
that I've seen that in practice. I mean,
No, let
you
me
know.
try to address Linda's thing to see
Mhm,
if I can. I understand what she means.
mhm.
I don't disagree with her and disagree with her at the same time. It's like I always have
Well,
that problem. Well, let me explain what the problem that I'm having is with what she said.
I was going to give you an example, but go
Go
ahead.
ahead. You no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I knew a guy in the army, smart as a whip. I mean, the guy did calculus equations for fun. Finding the area under a curve was nothing to him. But the guy didn't know to pour piss out of a boot. I'll just put it that way. He did not really understand how to function in life. I asked him for a ride home one day. My wife had to come pick up my ex-wife had to come pick up the car and go take the kids somewhere. I said, "Could I catch a ride home with you?" He says, "You want me to take you home?" I said, "Well, if it's okay. I mean, I can give you money for gas to drop me off along the way." "You want me to take you home with me?" "No, no, no, no. Could you drop me off at my house? It's on your way." I had to really explain it to the guy. He was kind of my last hope. Everybody else lived in the barracks. Smart as a whip, but couldn't grasp real basic things. And it just surprised the heck out of me. It's like, wait a minute, man. You're
So
not
let
dumb.
me address that. Does that well actually is that indicative of a smart person?
No, I don't think that's indicative of dumb or stupid. I just mean that the guy was not stupid. The guy was smart as hell. His comprehension, I mean, he'd look at a technical manual and he'd tell you anything you want to know about a piece of equipment.
There's a problem though. There's a lot of problems. So okay, let me just address the Linda thing because what
Mhm,
you opened up a can of worms
mhm.
or questions. Um, the idea that a person, what did she say? She said, hold on. She said,
Just because someone has a high IQ doesn't mean they're not an idiot.
okay, so if she means that you're saying, where you have someone that has this incredible ability, but in other aspects of life, they have screw ups in which one can easily point at and say, well, hell, what the, anybody can do that.
Yeah, you're smarter than that. Why'd you do that?
Right. I get that because there's deficiency in one area, but
Mhm,
it overcompensates in another, but deficient in one area and this and that.
mhm.
But in general, or broadly speaking, the concept of IQ is that across various disciplines, if one is good in one aspect of an IQ test, they're good in many. So that's how come they round about. So in a spectrum, they give you that you're intelligent, broadly speaking, in many disciplines. But that doesn't mean. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean,
I've got keep
Jim
reading.
Dockrell has one. I used to deliver office furniture in a huge box truck. I hated going to the University of Western Ontario, some of the highest educated people around, and they would step out in front of a moving truck. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I mean. You know, have an IQ of 180 and not know to stop at the curb and look both ways. You know, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Well, how could you not be observant? You know, so lots of geniuses in prison. If they were so smart, how'd they get caught? Oh, yeah, the prisons are full of people who thought they were smart enough to avoid getting caught. So, oh, well, I don't know. I think personally, when I don't know, you may go through life with a 200 IQ and not know you have that IQ, but something tells me, depending upon the person, a certain percentage of the population, once they're told they have a 200 IQ, suddenly they're better than other people. Not everybody, not all the way across the board, obviously, but a certain percentage would take that and
Yeah,
run with it.
yeah. I think that I overheard the idea that there's plenty of people that are dumb or stupid in jail. Um, or what was it? What was the comment? What was the
Um, Lots of geniuses in prison. If they were that smart, or how'd they? If they were so smart, how'd they get caught? Yeah.
most people that most people that are in jail and most people are just average regular IQ.
Hmm.
So most people in jail are just average regular IQ. Um, but the aspect of some sort of thieving or some sort of like illeg- illegality that someone
Well,
gets pinched on
yeah.
is not so I don't know if that's true.
Well, let's take blue collar crime, okay, or white collar crime rather. Let's look at oh my gosh, I can't think of the word. Cooking the books so that you can kind of skim money off of a company. Embezzlement, embezzlement. You have to think you're smart enough not to get caught in order to even attempt to do that. But people still get caught for it every day.
Thinking you're smart
You know.
and being smart are two different things.
I understood. We get into the Peter principle, and that's kind of sort of what I thought you were going, where somebody is promoted to a one step above their level of incompetence. Because if you're incompetent, you generally don't know that you're incompetent until you get there. And even then, you may not know. You have a doctor that, a patient dies. Patients die every day, but maybe another doctor would said, would you check for this? And oh man, no, I didn't even think about doing that. You don't know you're incompetent until you get promoted one step above that level.
Yeah, that's kind of what the same principle that I was saying with the IQ thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can say incompetent instead. There's a level at which we're incompetent
Mm-hmm.
that we do not know we're incompetent.
Right.
Um, and we assume that we know more than, and it also falls in line with the Dunning Kruger effect
Mm-hmm.
situation,
Mm-hmm.
which recently has gained popularity across the internet. When somebody wants to call somebody else stupid, they just say Dunning and Kruger. Um, the problem with Dunning and Kruger, and the problem with somebody saying that in context of trying to cut someone else down,
Mm-hmm.
is that they don't understand Dunning and Kruger, because Dunning and Kruger is, yes, it's saying people that are not competent are overconfident
Mm-hmm.
in their abilities at the beginning, and then as they go through learning something, they acquire humility by realizing how little they know. And people at the end of the scale with high competence in a particular discipline undervalue their ability and because they are aware of how much they don't know. But the novice on the other extreme jumps in feet
Oh
first,
yeah. Oh yeah. I know. Yeah.
because right, it's not until the process continues. But here's the problem of people using that to insult other people in a simple, you
Yeah.
could use it, but you have to be very judicious, because unless you're a complete fool. But the reason people are using it and are dumbasses is that they're trying to insult people, when the Dunning and Kruger represents what we all go through.
Hmm.
We all, as novice, have this expectation, but it's not
Hmm.
until we understand and learn that we realize, man, how little did I know, and how much more I know now. And then we have less confidence as we go forward, because we know that just the next horizon, there's more information to be had, to have a better picture of whatever conversation
Yeah.
or whatever topic that is. And so these people are using it as an insult point, because they're not really on about
They
this
don't really
knowledge.
know what it means.
Right, they're just going for the below the
Well,
belt hit.
yeah.
um but yeah, so no, long story short, yeah, I get your points. I just wanted to emphasize that the concept that they explain with
Hmm.
IQ is not these things, that these the the concept is that when someone takes an IQ test, the outcome of that is explaining that a person that's good in one area,
Hmm.
if a person is good in one area in the IQ test, it means that they're good across the board. It goes back to this master of none thing, and whatnot. It shows their level of mastery across fields, to whatever degree they do master it, and they place them on that IQ scale. And
Hmm.
as far as people committing errors, I think that errors are part of the. It does not reduce or add to the concept of IQ that someone commits an error, because we're human and there's other things
Yeah.
involved. So
Yeah.
in terms of that, the error that is made is that principle that you were saying, that what would you call it, the proficiency? No, you used another word.
Oh, incompetence.
Competent. The problem with all of this is available to all of us, is that we don't know. Like, I don't, like, for instance, I do not know at which level, in a general sense, my competence or my ability to understand um just
Yeah.
is flat lines, because
None of us do.
right, because we're set at whatever we're set in. And although
Hmm.
we can learn more, like, if, like, right now, if you say, Eloy, you don't know anything about Germany in 1845 in the
Hmm.
town of Hamburg, and
Hmm.
whatnot, I know that I could go
Hmm.
and find out, and I can
Sure.
present to you in a day
Sure.
a detailed explanation of what happened in that town in 1844. Blah, blah, blah. It's not the fact that I can. It's not the fact that I can return to you, and it's not the fact that now I have the information. It's the fact that I know the tools available in
You
order to go and seek it out.
and you
That
also have the ability to retain the information that you learn. Right.
on that right, but on that journey to
Hmm.
to to acquire the information, to return it to you, all those steps are what falls into what IQ is. So in other words,
Right. Well,
yes, I could say, order me a pizza, like I know how to order pizza, and you could say, well, you just use the internet for it, but it's the ability to use the internet to get the. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I do. But I think Jim has a good point here as well, in that as you become more competent, you realize that there are more factors at play that the amateur doesn't know. Therefore, your answers are more guarded.
Hmm.
I mean, if you listen to a scientist, a research scientist, they are the first to say there is so much we don't know, but the evidence points to this. But we can't come to the conclusion yet because we're not finished with the studies.
Mm.
They're very guarded in their answers.
Yeah.
And in fact, more often than not, they won't answer unless forced to. Like if somebody leaks a research paper or something like that, maybe they'll have to do a press conference, say, whoa, wait a minute. This is what we're studying. This is what the evidence points to, but we can't say yes, no, or maybe right now because it's inconclusive. We're not there yet.
Yeah, if something's inconclusive,
Mm-hmm.
one, if honesty is valued and
Mm-hmm.
truth is and understanding is valued, if it's valued, then one, if something's inconclusive, should say it's inconclusive. If something leans in a direction, they should explain it. Whatever it is that they now the errors involved in them making a statement
Mm-hmm.
through the natural process of human beings, because errors, when you write a sentence out, things will be left out that
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be if you wrote a paragraph, because there's
Mm-hmm.
more information available to you to write a paragraph included in a paragraph than it would be in a sentence. So a sentence is less nuanced than a paragraph, and so on and so forth. A book is
Well,
more nuanced than a sentence. um, if a person took care to say the details, and then there's the issue of that would be better. Better if you wanted to transmit the clearest amount of truth, but at the same time, there's that issue that you brought up with preference. I think you brought up earlier some
ego, yes, preference,
ego,
bias, ego,
and it's all that.
personal gain.
Yeah,
And that leads to a lot of things as well. Is this person actually being honest? If they have 100 studies, you do 100 studies on anything, you're going to get outliers in both directions. You're going to get certain number of studies that say no, and you're going to get certain numbers of studies that say yes. Well, if you cherry pick only those 5 studies out of 100 that support your claim, well, that's what you're gonna, and that's what you run with, then you're a less than honest person. Because what about the other 95 studies?
no, not less than honest. It depends, because
You,
if the strategies used in those 5 studies were more
um,
rigorous, and I mean,
but no, you can't take 5 studies out of 100 that threw the result you wanted and quote only those and
no,
be honest.
I get the overarching thing. I'm just saying
Mhm,
that a variation on that theme is that
mhm.
if you have X amount of studies and they're not as rigorous, the information is not laid out. If all things being equal, you have what you said.
Well,
You have a
well,
hundred
see,
studies that point in one direction and
okay.
not the other, and a few. No, no. Let me just say this one bit. If some of them are your preference, the outcomes, and you negate all the other ones, then
Mhm.
yes, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
But I'm just throwing in the curveball that if you have X amount of studies and they're not as rigorous and they're older, and you have newer ones, and the newer ones include so it all
But
depends.
that's taken into consideration during the peer review process. That's all taken into consideration. And that's why they do more studies on top of that and say, well, the evidence has changed
No, but people
because
are
we found this. Yeah,
no, but people argue over certain things, like, oh
right,
well, you should have done this or that. I mean,
right.
there's all that, but there is
Mhm.
a direction in certain things. But we're speaking broadly. I'm
Right.
just saying that.
I'm understood. But the point that I was trying to make was if you had a vested interest for monetary or personal gain, and
Mhm.
you're only pulling those 5 studies that support your predetermined conclusion, and you're using that to support you so
Yeah.
you can make money off of this, you're being less than honest.
Yeah, you're using it for a different ultra.
Exactly.
You're not using it for the idea of reaching the clearest conclusion
Hmm.
based on the data. You're doing it for that monetary thing. And I'll to wrap it up. I'm saying that this guy with a 200 IQ, supposedly, according to what they say,
Hmm.
it's not just him saying. I mean, there's um and being and saying things in the conspiracy realm that contradict genetics. And it's not just a throwaway. What I'm saying is not. So look, what I'm
Yeah, I
saying,
get it.
yeah, it's not just a throwaway. It's like this is some serious, heavy duty,
Well,
specifically clear.
and that may be why his name is not a household term, because if he's wrong about that, what else is he wrong about?
Right. And but the unfortunate thing is is that we don't know. Just I saw something, it looked like wow, and indeed there was information there that was
Wow is
pretty
right.
heavy duty. But then he threw out these conspiracy, and then I'm like, what the heck is going on? I was Yeah, it was disappointing. I mean, to see that. But anyways,
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. I understand where you're coming from. Man, I can't find it. I was looking for something that I used to have on my computer, and I can't find it. I don't know if I deleted it or what. There's a name for something like it on our side of this when you and it's something Gell syndrome. When you're reading a newspaper and you come across an article on a subject that you are very well versed in, or you could be considered an expert at, and you notice they got a bunch of stuff just factually wrong, and you know for a fact, and you can prove that they are just factually wrong about these things. When you turn the page, you totally forget about that. You're willing to believe everything else that they print because you're not an expert in those subjects. I think it's called Gelman Man or something like that. That just turning that page, we have a short term memory thing. And that may be something that we're experiencing here or that we're seeing evidence of here. Because if this guy is over here saying something that goes against genetics 100%, what else is he wrong about? But because we went on to a different video, oh, well, that makes total sense.
right, exactly. But the two things, actually, and I'll say, is it possible for him to be both correct in one aspect and totally wrong in another? Is that a possibility? Can a human being be correct in? I think yes. I think it's obvious. Yes, a person can be quite accurate in one instance and totally screw the whole notion up in another when it comes to another topic, because it depends on one's access to information and the variability of what you said, where what if they're not being truthful and it's focused on ego.
Mm-hmm.
um and then, but because of that, you have to question the whole thing.
Yeah.
Or the tendency is to say, well, heck, if they're bullcrapping here, obviously there's some stuff here that doesn't jive. So why would I trust the other stuff that they're saying? Unless the others, a person can take a truism, like
Yeah.
let's say the history of the United States. It's both true what they teach in school,
Uh-huh.
but it's false, literally false. Because and when I say literally through literature, because it doesn't, and you can argue it, but it doesn't teach the whole story. Now, do you have to teach the whole story in order for it to be? No, it's a part of the truth. So you're just getting a instance of the truth. So maybe this guy has instances of the truth that he's sharing, or of a truth that he's sharing, and the rest of it is hogwash.
Yeah.
Could that
Yeah.
be? I think that
I,
that's possible.
it could be possible. It could be that he is 100% right about a number of things
Yeah,
and wrong on a certain number of things.
yeah. Hmm.
And the hard part is figuring it out. Jim Dockrell said it himself: self assessment. Self assessment.
Yeah, yeah. It's a complicated thing, but anyways, I wanted to
It is.
mention that because it was like,
Okay. All right. Well, with that in mind, have a happy Thanksgiving, y'all. You got plans tomorrow?
yeah, yeah. We're gonna have turkey, or I
Ooh.
believe it's gonna be turkey. Sometimes it's ham.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
both are great, and both are guaranteed sandwiches tomorrow or the day after, rather.
I've actually lost a little bit of weight, enough
Mhm.
where it's been some poundage where I've gone closer into the 200 area,
Mhm.
like crossing over into not being 200.
Mhm.
So I'm cradling that, um, which has been good, and I've been so I will be. I'm not gonna go hog wild.
Well, I can't say that. I have stopped the candy, but I have stopped with the candy, but
Good.
I can't say that, you know, I've given up on the junk.
Oh, I see what you, now I'm seeing the.
So yeah, what can I say? I mean, I'm not looking to date anytime soon,
No, but it's
and
not date. It's
you know, I'm an old person. That's about all I got left. This and ice cream. No, but you know what the heck? I grabbed these and they're here. That's fine. I forget that they're behind me
don't
99%
touch
of
my
the time.
Twinkies.
Yeah, well, you know, I was saying to Linda, in fact, that's one of the reasons why we went to the second store yesterday, because the first store didn't have Twinkies. And I'm like, what? I don't believe it. And how, what store in Western civilization doesn't have Twinkies? You know? So we went to the other store, and sure enough, they were snitch. So
Oh,
just sometimes you just got to have a Twinkie, man.
I gotta tell you this before, because this is the last time I'll, or maybe not, but I gotta tell you this. The other night,
Mm,
I was walking my dog. It was late at night,
mm,
and we're walking, and it was this dark passage down
mhm,
this road. And as I'm walking, I see this little blip at
mhm,
the other side of the sidewalk at the
mhm,
extreme.
mhm,
And as I'm approaching, it's a guy
mhm,
with three dogs.
mhm,
And as I'm approaching, he's getting bigger and bigger
mhm,
because I'm approaching. And he just stands there.
mhm,
And I'm walking my dog. And he's still a distance away. And he's going like this, look. And
mhm.
I'm like thinking to myself, is this guy for real? This guy's not, number one, talking about assumptions and whatnot. I calculated out that this guy's not from around here
Mhm,
at all, because that's not the behavior of it. But it could be. But so I calculated the probability in my mind. I didn't
mhm,
even call it a calculation. I just looked and said, oh, this guy can't be from around here. Probably not. Three dogs. And as I approached, I stopped
mhm,
because I got me and my Vigo and I,
mhm,
and he's got these three savage dogs. And he's just standing there, not giving way on the freaking sidewalk
mhm,
with three dogs. But I stopped because there's three dogs and the
mhm,
guy there standing, and my dog's sniffing around. And I told him from afar, maybe like 30 feet
mhm,
away, 30, 40
mhm.
feet away. I said to him, so I guess this is a standoff because, in decent society,
Yeah,
do not two people make way for each other in order to cross?
yeah.
Isn't that decent society?
Well, maybe he thought you were going to give way. I don't know.
No, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
one guy, but he stood. You understand? He stood with
yeah.
three in a row.
Mhm.
You understand?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I'm
I
just me with my
understand.
dog.
He's
I
well,
could do. So
but he had three. You only had one, so he figures he's ahead in the fight.
right. So I
You
told
go
him,
around him.
yeah. Well, no, he wasn't giving. It was either go on the
Mhm.
road or whatever. And I said to him, so I guess this is a standoff, and he says, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Uh,
And I said, oh, this guy's a. I'm not gonna say. You could just this guy. And I said to him, "Oh, my dog is 11 or so years old, or 15. In dog years, he's like 50, whatever the number." And he says, "Oh, these are this, and that." I started politeness.
mhm,
He says, "Yeah, these dogs are dangerous. They're fighters. They're this. They're that." So I sized up the guy
mhm,
using those skills that humans have as
mhm,
a one of these macho men.
mhm. Yeah,
That whole
something to prove.
Yeah, that whole thing. And I'm
Mhm,
like, so my decision was just politeness and stuff. As as well, I'm gonna I'll go and venture off to the side here because nobody wants a midnight rumble or whatnot or whatever. And I said,
mhm.
have a good night. And as he walked away, it took him a little while. And he says, okay, have a good night. But it took him a while. So so yeah, it was one of those
Well,
ego
he didn't know
standoff.
what you were going to do either. So, to be fair,
Yeah, to be fair, but I was there, and I'm telling you what's what, dude.
Yeah,
And
understood.
Yeah, yeah. It's what I'm telling you. If I
Mhm,
had if I had to bet your money,
mhm.
you, you'd be you would be safer to bet with me
Yeah,
of what it was than
because
what it's
you
not.
know, because I get it. It's dark. You can't really see him until you get up there close to him and don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
But my first thought when he stopped way back was, is this guy going to cross the street? Does he live over there? What's going on here? But then the minute when, as you got closer and he could see a little bit more, and that macho thing had to kick out. I got no time for those people.
yeah. But it's I found it funny because it's one of those things like, you know,
Yeah.
that's not how we act around here, or at least
Hmm.
traditionally. So I summed it up as this guy. Who knows what the hell's going on with this? Who
Yeah.
knows what the story is? But I'm not gonna get into a tussle with with three dogs and an owner.
Yeah. No, it's not worth it.
I don't think
Not worth
Vigo
it.
would
Uh,
appreciate me getting him into that fight.
Linda says, glad to hear you don't plan on dating for a while. Yeah, well, no, I don't. I've seen it out there. No thanks. So, oh yeah, and Jim Dockrell, you're not going to go hog wild over ham?
No, no, I'm more of a turkey than ham, to be
Well,
honest with you.
I picked up a about a 3 pound tomahawk ribeye steak, and I'm going to throw on the Weber kettle and cook tomorrow. In fact, as soon as we get done here, I got to go do the rub on it, and wrap it up, and put it in the fridge.
No, that's gonna be good. And by
Yeah,
the
it is.
way, as long as turkey is somewhat moist, but when it becomes like dr-
Yeah,
dry as hell, something about dry turkey. I
that's
mean,
why
it's
they
good.
that's why they smother it with gravy to hide the fact that it's so dry you could sand oak with it.
I mean, my goodness. But oh
Mhm.
well. All right, let's land this thing.
All right. Well, uh, thanks for hanging out with us. Hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. It's been a rough month for a few folks. Prayers from our house to yours.
All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. Happy Thanksgiving. We're sponsored by Harneal Media, Steve Nealon. So be sure to check out his site. He's got great services there for you if you want to open up a website and such. RNEOmedia.com. Be sure to check it out. Be safe this week. Enjoy yourselves. Do the things you love. And we'll catch you next time, guys. Thank you. Peace.
Peace.